Welcome back to We Move Through Stormy Weather, a Phish podcast by Storm Sound and Osiris Media. My name is Ryan Storm, and we are back here today for a very special episode. This is now the fourth such episode I think we have done. Obviously you've clicked on this after probably reading the title, I assume. And so you know that today we're going to be diving into Jam of the Year 2018. Just like our last few episodes covering big jams of years, we will be utilizing the Phish.net Jam of the Year bracket from said year as kind of a vessel, if you will, an avenue to lead our discussion and kind of go in that direction and basically go matchup by matchup and look at the best jams of 2018, which is one of my favorite years of Phish, as we all know. And there's going to be a lot to talk about. I know that these two guys, these two fine gentlemen that I'm with here today, have a lot that they want to, poke holes in my love for 2018 and also just talk about it. Brian Brinkman and Justin Bruce joining me once again. Hello.
Hello.
Howdy. Ryan, it's okay. For some people, vanilla literally is the best flavor of ice cream. So we'll hear what you have to say about 2018 Phish. Maybe you'll provide some compelling arguments.
2018 is like, I feel like maybe it's like the rocky road of years of Phish.
It's like the
I would say it's like the
French
fish
vanilla.
food years of Phish.
The French vanilla. All right. Well, we've got a lot to talk about today. Justin, I know you had some things you wanted to lead off with before we dive into the bracket.
Well, I thought it might be interesting, just kind of like a 30,000-foot view on the year 2018 as a whole. Because when I think of 2018 Phish, I think high floor, low ceiling when it comes to the quality of jams. I think describing the music, it's upbeat, it's bouncy, warm keyboard textures. We're starting to get more into synth territory. As far as the overall sound is concerned. But there's a lot of uniformity across a lot of these jams. And if anyone's listened to us talk about these brackets before, just to help my brain, I tend to score all these out of 10. I ended up with like 15 or 16 jams that had 7.5 out of 10s. And that was kind of my ceiling for these jams. So Ryan, would you say that there is this is kind of like a stratified year for Phish jams? There are no like jams that are way better than all the rest. Okay.
Well, looking at the back, looking at the last like 5 or 6 years of Phish, there's always been one or two jams that are like very clearly jam of the year. Like last year, there's like, okay, like they're like the Banger Disease and the Deer Creek Sand and like, a couple other, like these are very clearly, I know, Brian, you're shaking your head because you have other things ahead of them, but there is a tier of jams that are quote unquote jam of the year material. Like going into the 2021 bracket, like I pretty much knew that the Deer Creek Simple was going to win because it is jam of the year. Brian's going to shake his head and say it's not, whatever. That's why we're here. And like 2019, Alpine Ruby Waves and MSG Tweezer. Like there are usually those jams that are that tier above. In 2018, for me, like I'm looking at the bracket and there's not one jam that immediately to me is like, oh, that's jam of the year here. And your point about high floor, low ceiling, like I don't think the ceiling's that low personally. But these jams are so good and there's so many of such a high quality that there's not one that kind of rises above the pack like there normally is.
Yeah, I think 2018, to Justin's point, it's a lot like what we're seeing right now in the NBA playoffs, where there's a lot of parity.
There we go.
That's something I really like when that happens with Phish. I think that I prefer, in hindsight and in the moment, this year to 2019. And I would say in some cases, this year reminds me of 2017, but without the shock value. And I think that is going to be one of the interesting things to get into in this conversation, because 2018 could have gone a lot of different directions. And as we had just seen with the 2013 to 2014 and then 2015 to 2016 pairing, we had an odd number year where the band really pushed forward and really broke free of a lot of elements, both musically, personally, that seemed to be holding them back from jamming at the level that we all knew at their best periods. Obviously, the Tahoe Tweezer 2013, the fall 2013 tour is just completely stacked with incredible shows and jams. And then 2014, rather than diving fully into the jamming, they kind of pull back a little bit, let the songs dictate things. And it's not until year's end where we start to really hear the jamming take over again, save for a few moments. Similarly, 2015, you get this stunning year of Phish, this brilliant summer tour, absolutely mesmerizing jams throughout. 2016, they pull back almost immediately. I was at a lot of those early 2016 shows, and I was like, "Who's this band? Where is this band that I
That's
saw
a
10 months
that's an
ago?"
unfortunate grouping of shows to have picked to do a bunch of.
Quite unfortunate. But then by the end of 2016, you start to see the transition towards who the band will become in 2017. And obviously, getting to my point here, 2017, you get the Baker's Dozen, you get, the 5 shows to lead up to it, where we get a near 30-minute simple, we get the return of Mr. Completely, and it's got a huge jam associated with it. Baker's Dozen, every show has a jam highlight. Dick's is the same way. MSG is the same way when they do the New Year's run. And then I remember going into 2018 wondering, are they going to pull back? And is the jamming going to be this isolated thing that happened in 2017? But instead, right out the gates, the band shows us that all the lessons that were learned in 2017 are going to be applied in 2018. So you don't have the shock of, holy crap, Phish has reached this new level. You have the band sustaining the level that they were at, which in some cases doesn't excite people because it's not new. But when you listen back to it, I think to all of our points here, there's a ton of disparity. There's a ton of opportunity for you to dive into something that you may have forgotten about or you may not have heard before, because there's just a lot of really cool stuff happening all over the place.
Yeah, it's also interesting to look at kind of the year in the context of the year as you were doing, but also in terms of things like Trey's tone, which he was changing it a lot. In 2018, it had the harsher, a lot more bite to it coming out of the gate in the summer. And throughout the year, he was constantly switching like the tubes in his amps and the amp configurations and the sound, whatever. And so it was kind of wonky at times. Like some of it, like the attack on some of his notes wouldn't register, and then the chords would fall flat. There was also like a sharp decrease in a lot of the composed sections of songs. Obviously a few notable exceptions, but there are a lot of flubs happening. So I feel like 2018 is a year where if you focus on the improv, it ends up looking a lot better than if you focus on the whole year in terms of complete shows and like what is it, chops. I'm losing the word. Clean
Like the
playing.
tightness. Yeah.
Tightness, thank you.
Yeah.
That's what I was looking for.
I remember in 2018 being very excited for summer tour. It felt like it had been a while since Phish had played.
Yeah.
Obviously, 2017 was a super exciting year, and being a little underwhelmed by the summer, even though there are lots of great jams that we'll talk about. And Ryan, your point about Trey's tone, spot on. Like there were times listening to some of those shows as he was getting used to his new rig setup, his new pedals, where it was like, are you gonna hit that note? Okay, you got it. But by the time that fall rolled around, he seemed a lot more comfortable. And by the time fall 2018 rolled around, the excitement was definitely there. Whereas summer was a little like, okay, all right, we're coasting. But all in all, and we love to poke and prod at young Ryan for being such a 2018 devotee. I mean, there's lots of good stuff that we're going to talk about here.
Yeah, you should talk to me again before 2021 happened, because I was even worse about it, as you both know.
I think last thing is the summer fall disparity, and that difference that you mentioned is really, really critical to understanding this year, because summer, as we have not mentioned yet, concludes with the canceling of Curveball, which I really think if we go back to that year and back to that tour, if Curveball happens and it happens on the level of what we kind of imagine the band could have played based on how they were jamming if you put that jamming band into a festival setting.
The secret set from that. Oh my
The
god.
secret set of all those songs, a lot of those songs became Casual Vox songs, and from a jamming standpoint, it would have been really interesting to hear them there. Obviously, would have lost whatever that would became in Casual Vox, but I think that you know unfortunately, it clouds a lot of the year in a lot of cases, but I think it also, the band takes a different approach when they have a festival coming up. And I think that you're absolutely right, Justin. The shows aren't as compelling to listen back to, although there are some very compelling shows, but it's really the jams. And, this was the year I think you and I saw the most Phish shows together. This was the first year that we hung out at Dick's, and then we saw all of Vegas
Hmm.
together. And I remember we walked out of a lot of those
Hmm.
shows like our jaws nearly touching the ground
I
and
mean,
pretty
Vegas
excited about a lot of
especially.
time. Yeah, Vegas was an excellent run. We saw a couple really good shows there. Um, but I guess like the larger point I'm making is you had this disparity where summer was leading up to something that was canceled, and then fall was okay. There's almost that motivation of, we did some really good stuff during the summer tour. We lost this one thing that we poured our hearts into and we were so ready for. It was almost like seeing what 2021 Phish would be without knowing that there was a global pandemic on the horizon, where it was
Right.
like, if we could lose that, we can lose anything. So let's just play like every show is the last show. And you really got that sense during the fall tour.
And
Yeah.
I think
All right. Well,
I was just real quickly before we get into the top left bracket. One of
yeah.
my favorite indicators for what a good show, what a good Phish show is going to be is, did they just play a show maybe that was a little lackluster? I, I feel like Phish is so great at rebounding off of a low spot, that although yes, Curveball sucked, that it got canceled, I wasn't planning on going, but felt really bad for everyone who was literally there in their RVs, and then 11th Hour gets canceled. I mean, I wonder how much of that, as you kind of alluded to, Brian, like sort of helped give them a little extra gas in the tank for fall 2018. But I guess we'll talk about the jams and we'll suss that out.
Yes. As much as I would like to talk about fall 2018 and 2018 contextually for like another hour, we got a lot to get through in this
Let's
episode.
do it.
So we're gonna head into bracket land, and before we start going through the matchups, of course, we need to cover Brian's bitchings. Brian, as always, has many opinions on the seeding of the bracket. We can all blame the early 2019 Phish.net community. This was actually the first bracket that was crowd seeded after a few years of it being committee seeded. It was taken over by a new organizer. So there was a lot going on with it. For example, the fact that there are 3 everything's rights in one region, which caused some problems in voting because people voted based on, I don't want to hear a third everything's right.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but Brian, air your grievances, please.
I mean, I think generally speaking, we need to cut this voting or seating by the larger public. Like, let's be real here: the larger public doesn't usually know most things. This needs to be done by thoughtful thought leaders, people who think about this, people who contextualize this, people who know the
Community
band's story.
involvement, Brian.
The community can vote on the jams. The community does not need to set the seeds. This is ridiculous. There are way too many cooks in the kitchen. We are not doing this right. So, as someone who is spending way too much time thinking about brackets, if you'll hire me as the bracket czar, I will cut that out immediately. We do not need the community involvement in seeding. Y'all can vote. That's what you're here for. That said, as Justin noted, high floor, low ceiling for 2018. What does that mean? Lots and lots and lots and lots of awesome jams. Tons of awesome jams in this show. I went through. There are a couple of obstructionists in this bracket that we're going to get to, but there are a lot of omissions that should be here. So just quickly through the obstructionists. The 1028 tube. It's a good tube. It does not belong on this bracket. It's a fun tube. The 831 Harry Hood is the reason why this is in the bracket, because it's the second song of the show and it's the first set Harry Hood
It's in the
since, I
bracket.
believe,
Oh, it is.
12/2/2003.
Yeah.
whatever it is, it does not belong in this bracket.
It's a great
it is
hood,
a good
though.
hood. It's fine. It's not a jam worthy. It's not a bracket worthy hood.
Right.
The 1230 tube. Why are we putting, just because tube goes 12 minutes? Why are we putting that into a bracket? I don't understand. The 9-2 tweezer. The only good thing about the 9-2 show is the third quarter of the show. That's like 46 days, tweezer, golden age,
That's it.
song I heard the
That's
ocean
what it
sing, I
is.
believe. That's what it
Oh,
is.
yeah.
It's that whole like segment of like segues. It's really nice, but the tweezer itself on its own, and I mean, this gets into a larger discussion that we're probably going to have at some point during this episode, but we have offline. Segues should be a part of the bracket.
No.
Yes, and this tweezer is proof that segues are needed, because within that segment, the tweezer should be there. Without that segment, it's not a very special tweezer. The 8-3 tweezer. I know everyone loves this show. I know that Phish decided that they should do it in a movie this show. This jam should not appear in this bracket. The 1031 tweezer. So many tweezers that are like just kind of good. They don't do anything beyond just being a good version of tweezer. The 8-5 golden age. I understand the tendency to see on paper 18-minute jam, mid-second set. Sweet. I got to throw this in there. You don't every time. Sometimes a 12-minute jam is better than an 18-minute jam. In this case, the 8-5 golden age doesn't belong. Finally, the 8-11 ghost. If there's anything that I want to die on, any hill I want to die on, it is that people need to stop fluffing the second set of 8-11 2018. I know it's a 5-song second set. I know it's all big songs. It's not that great. It's really not that compelling in music. It's just kind of like straightforward versions extended a little bit. Cool stuff. Great to throw an edible in your mouth and dance, with your friends at Merriweather Post to. Not very worth re-listening to. So those are our obstructionists. Just want to give a shout out.
Wait, when you opened that, you were like, I just have a couple of obstructionists. And then,
Well, just a couple.
10.
Just a couple.
Yeah.
Most of the brackets got good stuff in it, but there are a
Right.
few omissions that do need to be highlighted. We should pour a drink out here for our homies that the community decided to leave off the bracket because the community has infinite wisdom. The 1016 Show of Life. Don't talk, Ryan. Don't talk. The
It's not a
1016
jam.
Show of Life is if you're going to put the 1028 tube in there, you're going to put the 1016 Show of Life. Anyone out there who's laughing at me for advocating for a Show of Life,
I
should
love
turn
that
off
Show
this
of Life so
podcast for a
much.
second and go listen to the Show of Life. It is ethereal. It is beautiful. It is quiet. It is atmospheric. It is emotive. It will make you like completely revisit what that song is about. 722 Wombat. Why are we taking out killer ambient jams in the middle of set one? I don't understand. 728 Kill Devil Falls. Absolutely gorgeous jam in the middle of this Kill Devil Falls. 810 NICU. It's like everyone forgot that the August 10th show happened from Raleigh. Sloppy, humid, weird fishiness. Amazing stuff in this NICU is so.
And Trey did a Drake dance, I think, in Meat Stick.
We talk here about the 1028 tube being in the bracket. I don't know why. When the 1028 no quarter and the 1028 plasma are not in the bracket.
Thank you.
Someone please answer this for me.
I was at that show. Those jams are amazing. The only ever jammed out no quarter, and that plasma is unreal.
Exactly.
That plasma is so good.
It's so good. And it previews where they're going in Vegas. And then finally, I complained about the 831 hood, and I complained about the 1028 and 1230 tube. You know what you could replace those with? The 11-1 Harry hood, which is almost 20 minutes long and is absolutely fascinating. It has a We Are Come to Outlive Our Brains, whatever the hell that song is called. Yes. That jam in the middle of it, which calls back to the night before and was an amazing moment. And the 11-3 tube, by the end of the Vegas run, they were jamming tube and split open and melt with like the most brilliant synth sounds and atmospheric wandering. Just it sounded like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Both of those jams have it, and that 11-3 hood, the 11-3 tube, one of the best jams of the Vegas run that somehow was overlooked because we allowed the community to seed things.
Hey, I talk about that tube in episode 2 of We Move Through Stormy Weather with good friend Amar Sastry.
It's a great tube.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite tubes ever. I like your points about all of them, and I guess kind of the way you just I sat about the Show of Life and thought about it for a second there. I'm like, maybe But I feel like there are still like too many jams ahead of it for it to get a spot on the bracket. But everyone should go listen to it because it's
100%.
truly amazing.
I'm not advocating for it to be a 6 seed, but it needs to be in the bracket.
16.
So
You're right.
16, 15 seed, just so that people hear it and are like, oh my God, I need to
That's
stop
fair.
just
For
listening to
shock
18-minute
value, because,
tweezers.
All right. Are we ready to dive in here?
We're ready.
All right, so our 4 regions here are named after the 4 members of Kasvat Vaxxed. We've got Jules, Horst, Jorg. Is it Jorg or George? Okay, and Cleve. All right, I'll let you pronounce that again when we get there. But we're going to start here in the top left with the Jules region. And we've got 1 seed 1229 Tweezer up against the 16 seed 1028 Tube. So as Brian mentioned, this tube doesn't, this tube is awesome. It's fun. I was at the show, as I mentioned, had a fantastic time. I'm a Man is cool, but it's just like it's a fun fall 2018 tube, and this Tweezer is one of my favorite jams of all time. So one of my favorite Trey solos within a jam of all time. Just the emotion in his playing and that I Know You Rider-ish segment, just as the crowd gets louder and louder and louder as they just move towards the peak. It's unbelievable. This jam is so good. Just to specify, of course, because of the segue rule, this does not include the Death Don't Hurt Very Long or the second Tweezer. This ends once they start Death Don't Hurt Very Long. But this is just like super patient for the first half, and they just go to the skies in the second half, and one of my favorite Trey moments ever. So wins here.
Yeah, it's an easy win. This ends up being my second favorite jam of the year. When I think of 2018 as vanilla ice cream, though, this is top shelf French vanilla ice cream, old fashioned vanilla ice.
It's like a $20 pint.
The vanilla is organic, and we're scraping the vanilla seeds out of the vanilla pot. It's really, really great. It's interesting to hear you say the Allman Brothers esque licks that Trey plays toward the tail end of the jam, Ryan. I heard a lot of Pleasant Valley Sunday licks across 2018. Not a lot of those, like in many of the middling jams, not a lot of them made it into the bracket here. The Mike bomb at 9 minutes. I mean, who doesn't like a Phil bomb? Who doesn't like a Mike bomb? But great jam. This ends up coming out of the bracket. This corner of the bracket for me, this is a really strong bracket, which we'll obviously get into. But as I said, I had ranked all these jams from 1 to 10. I ended up with like 16 of them with the same 7.5 rating, and 6 of those are in this bracket. So this is a really strong bracket, which speaks to the fact that the Tweezer came out of it. So it's a fantastic jam. I love the synthy rap at the end, which is certainly a theme here as we discuss some of the other 2018 jams.
Yeah, this Tweezer wins very easily in this first matchup. I have it winning very easily in the next matchup against the Light. I have it losing.
Spoiler alert.
I have it losing ultimately in the Sweet 16. I won't mention what jam that is because that is my jam that comes out of the overall bracket. But this Tweezer, I just remember it in the moment. It was so joyful. I remember the 1228 show being a little bit weak and having, I'm wont to have concerns about Phish immediately the moment that they play a subpar show. And then they came out, they played this excellent show on 1229. The first set was full of energy, full of bubbly excitement, a lot of like kind of candy jamming throughout. I remember really good. What did the set close with? Was it 46 days? Wolfman. Oh, it's good.
There's a good 46 days into cities from that set, but it's the Wolfmans with the party time debate.
Right. I remember loving that, and then they came out for the second set, and they just kind of tore it apart. And there's Tweezer, the I Know You Rider throwback to 7/28/17 Chalk Dust, where you start to like hear this band that is now 16 months, 18 months on from the Baker's Dozen, that is just still living in that high of what was discovered during that period in time. Huge complaint here over the lack of segues, because you have to have the Death Don't Hurt Very Long and the second Tweezer to make this complete. It's a full jam, but without that, which I'm judging this based off of, it's going to lose ultimately in the Sweet 16. But
There
really,
we go.
really great version.
There we go. All right, we move on to our second matchup here. We've got an 8 seed, the 8-7 Light, up against a 9 seed, the 10-26 Mercury. As 8-9 matchups tend to be, this is pretty balanced here. This Light is cool because you can hear where Whack Tube would come from in the middle of it. Very clear birth of that theme. This Mercury is awesome because this was the beginning of the absolute tear Mercury went on for about a year. God, what a time that was. Fall 2018 Mercury's. But this one is great and ends with an awesome segue into Moon Age Daydream. I unfortunately missed night one of Rosemont, which was sad. For an economics midterm that wound up not mattering at all. So I should have been there.
Yeah, what are you
but
doing
no.
now? Are you doing economics, or are you a jam
Nope.
band podcaster? Right?
Yes. Yeah.
Short-sightedness.
Exactly. So I went with Light here, but really like both of either of these jams could win. Both lose to Tweezer.
Yeah, I scored both of these jams equally, both great. I love in the Camden Light. Trey's like a little stabby toward the tail end as he's reaching the peak, which speaks to how he kind of talked about, I don't want to say struggles, but sort of getting acclimated to his new pedal board. I feel like it was summer 2018, right? That he had like, where they did the show for New Year's during the pandemic, he had gone down to that spot in random rural Pennsylvania and like had his whole rig sort of redone and was getting used to it. Okay, just checking my memory. So I feel like you can kind of hear him even in this jam, which is fantastic. Still sort of like feeling it out. I went with the Mercury. I love Page's sense, like almost like a Mellotron type tone. And then Ryan, just for you, a little clav action to round out the jam. This is pre-clav tweet era, but yeah, these are equally great jams. I rolled with Mercury, but I think both pretty indicative of what was happening, in 2018.
Yeah, I ultimately went with Light here. I think that the jamming that preludes Walk Tube is just so pretty, and it's lyrical. But I definitely hear your points. Funny story, just with regards to this Mercury. So this night, my wife and I went on a date to see A Star Is Born. Bradley Cooper, Lady Gaga. Went to the Alamo Draft House where they serve you a meal with your movie. And I was planning on webcasting all 3 Chicago shows. I was not going to Chicago. I was very sad about not seeing Phish in Chicago because I was going to be going to Vegas. But I remember walking out of the movie, turning my phone back on, and my phone had essentially blown up. And this is because for the previous year and a half, Dave Goldstein and I had spent any chance we could on Beyond the Pond talking about Mercury and talking about the war on drugs and talking about how the Mercury needed to jam, and we needed a jammed out Mercury. It was primed, and we were talking about how much we loved the song, and all of our devoted followers were going crazy, tweeting at us, following up, tweeting at us, because neither one of us were responding, because I was at the movie, Dave was at some other thing. Neither one of us were watching the show, and we got to celebrate in like our large community, just going, you guys, you willed it. It finally happened. We got a Mercury jam. More on a version about a week later in a little bit that does take this brilliant exploration that comes off of Mercury and does some just truly magical things with it. But that was really funny. I just I ultimately went with the Light, which loses to the Tweezer.
All right. And then our next matchup, our third of the bracket, we've got at a 5 seed, the 724 Carini, up against the 9-1 Down with Disease at a 12 seed. I think this Disease is a pretty well seeded at 12. It's solid, gets kind of out there for a few minutes. This opened the show, correct?
Or this was the second song of the show. They did Sand,
it was early first
nice
set.
solid Sand, and then this.
But early first set kind of gets out there a little bit, and then this was the first finished version in a really long time, I think. And so that was exciting. I remember I was webcasting that show, and I remember the way that they hit the ending just felt great. I love that. But this Carini, my God, what a year for Carini this was. One of the best in the song's history. Obviously, not 2021, but this is a great year for Carini. This one is awesome. This is the one that goes type 2 from the first note of the jam. They immediately drop into this funk groove. Mike teasing MoMA, just getting after it, and just they're just hanging out in this funk groove for a little while, and then they pivot very nicely into this major key explosion for the second half. It is 14 minutes long. It packs so much in, and I mean, this is a jam that could have done a lot of damage in a different region. This one doesn't make it past the second round for me. But that's just because of the strength of what it goes up against. But I absolutely love this Carini.
Yeah, I'll echo everything you said, Ryan. The one thing I'll add is that the upbeat Trey peak, even though this is just a 14-minute jam, it's really patient. Kind of really
Yeah.
takes its time unfolding. And I ended up going, with the Carini over the Down with Disease. I found the Down with Disease peak like a little bit predictable.
Yeah.
It was awesome in the moment. I remember
Yeah.
being
Well, that's
at
why
that
it's good at
show.
12.
Yeah. It's this is a well-seeded matchup, and I gave the edge to Carini, and not too much more to add to it than that.
Yeah, I went with Carini here. I will say, listening back through all these jams, this 9-1 Disease was one of my. Oh, I forgot about that, and really enjoyed it on second re-listen. I was at this show. I think Justin, you and I probably hung out for this show. I think this was the first Dick's year that we did like all 3 shows together, and that became like tradition.
Yeah.
But I remember this this first set was so good, following up that amazing 831 show, and then it kind of drops off after the Set Your Soul Free in the second set, and I kind of never really wanted to go back and listen to the show as a result of everything that happened in the second set. So I went back and I listened to this Disease, and I was like, oh my god, like this is a really really solid second song of the show jam. But ultimately, this Carini, which the third quarter of this 724 show is outstanding. There's a ton of really good jamming in there. There's a really good Mercury. There's a really good song I Heard the Ocean Sing. First set has a ton of rarities and just like weird off the cuff calls. Really enjoyed this show in the moment, and going back to this Carini, it just it feels like an early peek into where the band is going to go throughout this overall tour and this overall year. Just feels very exciting, very bubbly. It ultimately loses in the next round because my representative from this bracket comes out of the next round, which Ryan Storm. Why don't you tell us what the next matchup is?
Yes, thank you. The next matchup, we've got the 11-3 Split Open and Melt at a 4 seed up against the 9-1 Set Your Soul Free at a 13 seed. Brian, I want you to get first crack at this Melt.
Thank you. I mean, I will say the 9-1 Set Your Soul Free, which is a 13 seed, again, returned to this after not listening in a couple of years. Quite enjoyed it. Thought it was a very nice version of Set Your Soul Free. Cool early hints at how abstract that jam will go to. So definitely felt like it was potentially even a little bit underseated. Just really, really nice stuff coming from it. But this Split Open ML, I have this representing the bracket. So this wins all future rounds until we get to the final 4. This is about 21 minutes. It ends the second set of the final night in Vegas. And Justin, you and I were hanging out during this. I remember we had really, really nice seats low down, about halfway back on the floor, looking straight at the band. And the lights were incredible from there. The sound was really rich from there. And I remember the third quarter of this show being awesome. And then it kind of got a little standard. And then they go into Melt. And I remember thinking immediately when they went into Melt, pretty much every recent version of Split Up and Melt has been great. Pages since have been great. This feels late in the show and then the run for another highlight. But if it's gonna come, it's gonna come in a song like this, and then being completely transfixed. Talked about Close Encounters of the Third Kind type of jamming. You get that all over this. The lights are literally like right over the band, hovering them, flashing blue and pink and orange and yellow lights, and then they would go all white, and then it would all go out, and the lights would kind of shine around the arena, and it looked super spooky. And then they'd come back to the band. It just like you really got the sense of Kuroda having full command of his lighting rig, which at this point he'd been using for a year and a half, the moving rig. The band had full command of where they were at sonically, and it really felt like one of those moments that I absolutely love when Phish is at a peak moment in their tour, but you can see the end of the tour coming, and you just think, can't you just book like 3 or 4 more shows after this?
Yeah,
Like, can't we
keep
just keep
going.
this going? Like, why would we lose this? Like stop when the momentum is up, but like when you're playing like this, just try to keep going. And when I listen back to the Split Up and Melt, it sounds like the best of 2018 to me. It sounds like a band that is has cracked a code and is building off of that rather than is trying to move into a new phase. It's so entwined with the inspirations from 2017, but you can hear them going towards the future.
Very well put.
Yeah, now I have this melt as my number 4 jam of the whole year. So if it were in another bracket, it could easily be a 1 seed. I feel it's pretty significantly underseeded in the 4th spot here of this bracket. But anytime Phish gets weird and gets out there, I'm in. I love how this disintegrates into space toward the tail end of the jam, and they're able to bring it back into melt to wrap the set, like really in a really compelling fashion. So loved everything about the melt. Well said, Brian. I actually scored the the Set Your Soul Free. Uh, I scored it the same. I have both of these as a 7.5 out of 10. I think that this
Wow.
Set Your Soul Free is the most underrated jam in this whole group of 64. I think if it were anywhere else, it could be. It's my 10th favorite jam of the year. It could be a 2 seed. It could be a 3 seed in any other bracket. I don't really understand how it's a 13 seed here.
I'm gonna guess a lot of people share the sentiment of Brian as this show petered out after this jam, and I don't want to go back and listen to it, and I have a bad taste in my mouth, so I'm gonna rank it low.
I think that's probably
Which is why the
fair.
community should not be ranking jams.
Brian, where would you have ranked this?
The Set Your Soul Free? I think I'm in agreement with.
At the time, with the bad taste still in your mouth.
Well, but that's the
that show.
thing is when you're looking at a whole year,
Right.
you have to look at it objectively removed from the show. So if you're actually putting together a bracket, you have to think about this as the jam outside of the show. And I agree with you. Like, that's why I didn't go back to it. But I think listening to it this time around, this is definitely no lower than a 7 seed.
Right. Definitely. This, you mentioned that this melt also being, one of your top jams of the year. And I feel like the top 4 seeds in this region are like 4 of the best jams of the entire year. Like it's kind of ridiculous that they're all in one corner. But like there's some insane stuff that we'll get to in a couple of matchups. But yeah, I have Melt winning here, beating the Carini and ultimately losing to the Tweezer. I don't know if there's anything else I can say that Brian didn't say. I love Fall 2018, and this melt is a shining example of the Fall 2018 sound.
I'm proud of you because I feel like this melt really harnesses like some of those 2003 jam vibes that we disagreed about sometimes when we were going through that bracket. Where this is, I feel like for you, Ryan, not to speak for you, but I'll speak for you. I feel like this is pretty out there as far as your taste are concerned, but it really speaks to like how they're able to hold together some melody as they just push and push and push like farther and farther out. So props to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next up, we've got the 1026 Tweezer at a 6 seed up against the 720 Simple at an 11 seed. This Tweezer, I feel like, is definitely overseeded. There are a lot of great Tweezers in 2018, but there are very few that stand above the pack. This is 20 minutes long, pretty run of the mill Tweezer kind of formula at this point. Like, really good bliss jam, kind of blaze on vamping in the second half. Great segue into Golden Age. And again, really solid, enjoyable jam. And one I was very sad to miss on the first night of the run of this Rosemont run. It still wins this matchup for me, but this Simple is also really excellent. I love the kind of grimy tones they get into. This is still very, very early in the year, and so this jam was kind of a statement that first set jamming was sticking around. This is first set at the Gorge. Great Rhodes work from Peter in this jam. I love the phasery sound that he has here, where it's a bit slower. So it
I think you meant Peter's father, Paige.
oh my god. Oh my god. I can't believe I just said Peter.
That's
I've been talking about Goose too much. Paige's Rhodes. Oh god, who am I? I was wondering why you were both looking at me like that, and then I realized like Paige's
Rick
Rhodes
fucking tears it
sound.
up in here. I can't even get over how much Rick is just like. I mean,
We
could you
rip it.
imagine 2018?
Just for the
Rick
record,
playing with Phish?
at this time, Goose played Turkish Hills on the same night that my jam of the year was played. Was the last time that Goose played Turkish Hills.
What's
Wow.
Turkish Hills?
Yeah.
Turkish Hills is a song Peter wrote about an old girlfriend that is never going to get played again.
I have not heard this. I think I need to now.
It's not a very good song.
Oh, yeah. Inspiration truly truly hits Peter.
I was wrong.
When he's
It was
writing
not. This was not the Turkish Hills show.
Oh, okay.
What a ping pong for Peter. He's compared to Paige.
Great.
Freudian slip.
They did play,
and then you insult
what?
his song about his ex-girlfriend. Come on.
I'll give you this, Brian. They did play Ghostbusters rap on the
Yeah,
night
of
of my jam of the year. But back to this simple, where Paige plays excellent Rhodes. Little grimy. Very very nice jam here. But Tweezer wins.
I went with the simple. You've kind of covered it all. I scored these equally. I just appreciated the kind of slow build and the patient build toward the peak in the simple. Maybe it's just having been a Phish fan for multiple decades now. It's like, yeah, a middling tweezer, which is great, which is a fantastic musical experience, a middling tweezer, but it's not necessarily going to move the dial when you're comparing it to other jams. So I rolled simple. Brian, what about you?
I went simple as well for very similar reasons. I'm just looking through my bracket right now. I've got 3 tweezers I thought did not belong on this bracket, and I've got 2 tweezers that I think were overseeded that we will get to. The only tweezer that made it out of the first round for me was the 1229. I thought that this was a pretty average good year for tweezers. None of the versions were objectively bad. They just weren't that fascinating. And I think the same thing, I'm trying to think back to 2017. We didn't have a really good tweezer in 2017.
Yeah, there hadn't been one in a while. Was there a really good one from 2016?
There are a couple really good ones. 1230 immediately comes to mind as one of
Yeah.
the best tweezers of that year. But yeah, it was kind of since 2015. Nashville 2016 is a very good version. But yeah, we were kind of at this point where tweezer was a reliable 16, 17 minutes, and it didn't do too much. I remember they played it on night 1 of the Baker's Dozen, and people were like, okay, so this is the sign that they're going to do repeats, because there's no way they're going to do no
Right.
tweezer for
That's going to be
13
no, and
shows.
like that's the Baker's Dozen tweezer, like,
And that was it. Yeah, it's not very good. This was I
Seven
think it's
Below that comes after it. Anyway,
Oh yeah, I think it's a very good tweezer. I want to be clear. I think that this is a very good tweezer. It just the stuff that you guys were talking about the Rhodes. Jeff's vocal jam was sick. No, the simple just like it also, and I know that this contradicts something I said earlier, where you have to just think about the jam, but I'm a eternal hypocrite. Where this simple is placed, Justin said this very well. It indicates from the very start of the tour that the band is going to be jamming in the first sets. And I enjoyed the 720 show overall, and this simple just does a really good job of setting the palette of where we're going jamming wise. So simple wins for me and loses in the next round.
There we go. Next matchup, we've got the 8-7 Down with Disease at a 3 seed and the 11-1 Chalk Dust Torture at a 14 seed. I don't like this matchup because I really like this Chalk Dust. It's really awesome jam. But this Down with Disease is a behemoth. It's kind of unfortunate how not great the full shows from this Camden run were, because the jams from this run, specifically this Disease, the Light, and the Everything's Right from night 2, are phenomenal. Pretty solid melt from night 2 as well. But this disease is so emblematic of the summer 2018 sound for me. You have this groove happening. Page is on his synths, on his new, on new at the time Moog Voyager, which he had gotten at the beginning of 2017. Trey's using that Leslie effect, but it's very classic, that sound, but it's done so well. And Brian, we talk a lot about this post-peak jamming that was so prevalent in 2018. And it's just this angular, this grimy, also driven by how sharp Trey's tone is at the time. It's 24 minutes. It's sprawling. It's massive. It's amazing. This decision. I have this one making it all the way to the Elite 8. Going over the 2 seed in this bracket was really, really tough for me. Took multiple listens to decide. But I absolutely love this Down with Disease. And this Chalk Dust is like the little brother of 10-17-21 to me. It's focused, it drives, it goes. This one has a very nice third stone from the Sun tease in it. But man, I had the misfortune, and I say misfortune with quotes because still seeing Phish, but I saw the only Chalk Dust in fall 2018 that didn't get jammed out. This one's awesome.
Yeah, this Chalk Dust is my first wrong seeding of the bracket. I have this way too low. This should be a 5 or 6 seed, maybe a 7 at the lowest. Disease wins overall because it just has a little bit more meat on the bone, but I don't think it's any better than the Chalk Dust. I think that the Chalk Dust accomplishes about the same amount in 7 less minutes, but those 7 extra minutes in the Disease really hint to something that I think makes jamming in 2018 really interesting, and that's the post-peak jamming, which even in the Baker's Dozen, there's not a ton of they peak a jam and then see what's on the other side of that jam, and they rhythmically kind of guide themselves to whatever's next. You start to see that a lot in 2018, and this Disease has a ton of it, and that post-peak jamming more than anything, I think, led them to the huge highs of 2021 and the early highs of 2023, where now they almost don't even need to go to the peak. The peak is kind of secondary, and the whole point of the jam is this exploratory area until they work up to a peak. So I think this Down with Disease is kind of forward thinking in that sort of standpoint. And ultimately I have it losing though in the Sweet 16 to a huge upset jam, which we will get to in our next matchup. But it's 11-1 Chalk Dust, man. Put in your earbuds. Seriously, this is not a 14 seed. Most of you out there clearly don't know this, and you should
take in the 1230 tube is seated higher than this.
Yeah, come on.
What's up with that?
Yeah, I as someone who re-listened to all these jams though, I was at the Vegas show, hometown show. The CDT didn't really blow my hair back that much. I enjoyed the staccato clav jam. Maybe it's being old, but it's like we lean on the third stone from the Sun tease a little bit to give us some direction, and then we get upbeat. Whereas I think that the Down with Disease, it's fantastic. I have this scored as one of my top 16 jams of the year. It's perfectly seated in the 3 spot in this bracket. Ryan, you said it well. It's like it's very emblematic of the 3.0 sound at this point. It's almost like a grab bag of our tricks and our sounds and our textures in 3.0. And then I just love the synthy exploration and the extended grooves. And I have this Disease, of course, winning this matchup, and I have it going, I guess it would be to the Elite 8 in this bracket. So big fan of the Disease.
There we go. Next matchup, we've got 7 seed 1023 Ghost and 10 seed 1021 Light. I don't really like this Ghost. It's not very good.
What?
I'm just kidding. I was trying to get a reaction out of Brian. I think he got that I was trying to do that. It's fall 2018 and a really good jam. I can't not like.
I got thoughts. Don't worry.
Yeah, this jam is amazing. First of all, this whole set 1023 set 2 is a phenomenal set. An ode to the previous shows in Nashville with a jammed out mics, not a second jam, just a straight jammed out mics. which is great, and then leads into this Ghost, which is all sorts of the dark, grimy goodness that makes fall 2018 so good. You've got pages. So this is also 2018 is, in my opinion, the peak of Page and Mike led 3.0 jams. This is when the two of them were sonically like leading the band in pretty much every jam of the year. All these top jams are Page and Mike throwing ideas out here, and this is the two of them like battling each other. Like Mike is getting into the synthy tones at this time as well, and so obviously Trey hasn't yet. So it's the two of them getting into this dark shit. And this Ghost is amazing. I wish it wasn't going up against what it goes up against in the second round. Otherwise, it could go much further. But, c'est la vie. This light is solid. 1021, kind of gets a bad rap because there's The Line and Rise come together in the second set. But there's some good jams in there.
Yeah, I ultimately have this Ghost winning, and I have this Ghost going all the way to the Elite Eight and losing to the Split Up and Melt. This Ghost is, you talk about the battle, like I hear the battle more between Mike and Trey, because Mike is so lead heavy in this, and it's the two of them almost out, trying to outmaneuver each other to be the string instrument that composes where the jam goes. And the fact that neither one of them lets the other person through almost makes it better, because it truly sounds like they're almost, Mike and Trey, what they've done this during Free, where they like face each other and they do a duel where one lays down a line, the other one lays down, they see where it goes.
Yeah.
And that's always just kind of like, oh, okay, cool, we're doing like the whole jam band thing of you do one thing, I do the next thing, you do the next thing. It's fun, but that's not really Phish. This is them doing that jam as Phish, where it sounds like King Crimson, it sounds demonic, it sounds mechanical, it sounds industrial. And so to have that in this segment of a show that is just press play on mics and you're not letting up, like it's pretty much the whole set you're going through. It's one of my favorite sets of the year. It's one of my favorite sets to listen back to. It's amazing that it came after that horrible set one that just feels like, let's just press shuffle on some
if
big
you
Phish songs.
If you had Chat GPT produce a Phish standard first set, that's what would come out.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. Aside from the Twee Prize opener.
Right.
Before I moved to Vegas, I lived in Nashville for 13 years, so I really had some FOMO about this 2018 Nashville fall run. It just wasn't in the cards for me to go back to Nashville to see these shows. But I don't believe Ascend Amphitheater, probably my favorite outdoor venue to see Phish, even though I've only seen a handful of shows. The sound is phenomenal. It's small, it's intimate, it's right downtown in Nashville. It's great. They have not played a lot of great set ones in Nashville that I can think of in the handful of shows that they've played there. But man, this more than makes up for it. This is the Ghost is my 8th favorite jam of the year. So to me, this should be like a 2 seed, maybe a 3 seed. It's really, really good. You guys have said everything I was going to say. I think I heard and if I only had a brain tease around 11 minutes, or like the idea of that. But my favorite part about the jam is the upbeat Phish sort of driving rhythm to the end of the jam that coalesces the peak. That is, if that's what's happening in a jam, if Phish is super active and really like in charge. You guys talked about Mike and Paige or Peter like dueling it out and sort of like dominating each other in a really good way. I just love when Phish is the one who steps forward and takes it all home. So I'm all about the Ghost. The Ghost wins this bracket. The light is great, but I have the Ghost winning this matchup. And then going into the Sweet 16, I have the Down with the Z's from Camden, just barely edging the Ghost though in the Elite 8. Actually, in the Sweet 16 to get to the Elite 8.
Phish.net says you've got a tired of waiting for you tease from Trey and this Ghost.
Yeah, that's in there for sure.
Okay, I went and I checked if I only had a brain, but there's just that.
It's noted in my mental database.
There we go. All right, our final matchup of this region, we've got the 10-21 Waves at a 15 seed and the 8-3 Carini at a 2 seed. Brian, you already talked about how you think this show is a little bit overrated. I'd say, yeah, maybe the show is a little bit overrated. This Carini is fucking amazing. This is the best Carini of the year. This shit is so good. You have the first jam, chest fever kind of vibe, very uplifting, and then the post peak. This is it. This, in a lot of other years, this would have been a 12-minute Carini. This would have ended after that nice peak, and it would have been like, oh, that was a good Carini, and now this second set has too many songs in it. But then this is so cool to me. I'm gonna make a Goose comparison. It's like the Bozeman This Old Sea, in a lot of ways. Similar kind of staccato playing on electric piano. Page starts on the Rhodes for a lot of this jam. Trey starts looping this like dun 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 thing, and then just like comes in with these screaming leads. It's amazing. Page eventually comes over to a synth with like a huge like beep. It's amazing. It's so good. This, unfortunately, based on my many listens, I went with the Camden Disease over it. But I could re-listen to it now and then have a different opinion. But I love this Carini so much. The Waves is good.
The Waves is good. The whole 1021 show feels a bit inflated to me. I think a lot of people love the Simple from the first set, which I'm sure we'll talk about. The second set has a lot of issues. It's kind of made up for the fact that it's got a double encore, but that's just kind of like a nice in the moment thing. I want to be clear, like I really like the 8-3 show. I remember I went and saw the LA and the Austin shows, and the LA shows were the definition of perfectly serviceable Phish. Had a good time, hung out
Couple of
with some
good jams.
buddies, couple good jams, but walked out of there being like, did you guys really give it your all? And then the Austin show I went to on a whim. First set was as vanilla as it could possibly be. The coolest thing that happened was Mike took off his pants to reveal a pair of shorts underneath because it was like 105 degrees out, and it
Why
was
was he
just
wearing
insane.
pants in the first place?
And they were hip, and then he was like, I'm going to take these off. And he took them off on stage, and people went crazy, and it was the most exciting thing that happened in the first set. But then the second set had that amazing everything's right, really good third quarter. I say all this because I got back to Denver. My wife went away for the weekend. I think she had a bachelorette party to go to, and so it was just me and my buddy, me and my son, my buddy, my dude, and we were walking the dog around the neighborhood, streaming 8-3 on my phone, and they start playing the Ghost, and I was like, oh cool, third song Ghost. Last time they did this in Atlanta was a good version. It produced one of my favorite shows of the year. And then this one just kept going and kept going and kept going. We'll talk about it. But I remember just like coming home, putting him down, and just like my favorite webcast activity, hanging out. Phish is playing a good show, and my phone is blowing up with good friends texting all happy things about Phish. And that's what happened this entire show. So it's a very good show. This Carini to me is the centerpiece of it. Your point about the post-peak jamming is perfect. To me, this Carini, I don't think it's overseeded. I think it goes up against the Ghost, which is one of my favorite ghosts of the entire. It's one of my favorite ghosts ever. One of my favorite jams of the entire year. So this loses in a stunning upset. We're
Wow.
talking like Los Angeles Lakers versus Memphis Grizzlies type of upset, though. So it's not like that stunning because it's LeBron James and Dylan Brooks is an idiot, and John Morant doesn't know how to embrace being a superstar in the NBA. And that's kind of what we get out of this Carini when it goes up against Ghost, which is just a stalwart genius level jam. So I have the Ghost beating it, but I love this Carini.
I recall during summer 2018 tour being relieved when they hit the Atlanta stretch and we got some big jams. You mentioned the Ghost in set one, but then with the Carini, it was like, okay, all right, things will be fine. It's going to be okay. But I actually think the Carini, which is a great jam, I think it is overseeded. This is my 16th favorite jam of the year, and like I've said, I have a lot of these bunched up very closely together, so there's a lot of wiggle room. But I really think this could have been like a fourth seed, maybe a fifth seed. I have the Carini beating the Waves, but then I have the Ghost from Nashville beating the Carini. So there it is.
Hmm.
Never going to turn down a good Carini, and this was indeed a good Carini, and it really did serve for me mentally anyway as kind of a pivot point for 2018 Phish, that tour.
Hmm. Interesting. I'm
You're a smart man.
surprised you guys aren't as hot on that Carini as me.
It's not that I'm not as hot on that Carini. It's that the Ghost is the better jam.
That's fair. All right, let's mosey on over to the Horst region here in the top right. We are gonna start at the top here with the 1019 Golden Age at a 1 seed and the 92 46 Days at a 16 seed. As you said in your bitchings segment earlier, Brian, this 46 Days is notable only for the segue into Tweezer. Really, like nice little major key jam, but the segue, the really percussive jam that they get into, is really cool. This Golden Age is awesome. You go into the dark depths of the vacuum of space, into a wormhole, and then out the other side, and then into another wormhole, and then you kind of slowly disintegrate among Page's synthesizers. It's a great jam. I don't think it's a 1 seed. I think it lacks some of the cohesion of the other big jams, but it's still really fun to listen to. But I have it going a couple of rounds here.
I have to raise a question, Brian, because I agree with everything you said. I love everything you said, especially about the going into the wormhole. In my notes, I said this Golden Age goes into it festival noise mode. And one of the last times we were all together, I recall you talking about how the 46 Days, it's just noise. This isn't music. This is unpleasant. So is it because you're a different listener in 2018? Is it because it's 2018 and there's like a nice scoop of vanilla ice cream on top of all this? Explain yourself. It's a great jam.
That's a good accusation to lay at my feet here. I will say that if this Golden Age was in probably 2 of the other regions, it would not be making it past it would be losing in the second round to the 8 or 9 seed. I just feel like the competition isn't quite strong enough in this bracket. I feel like the difference to me is this one holds my attention longer. Maybe it's because there's a little more going on before it truly disintegrates into noise. But this is why I'm not super high on a jam like the 12/30/17 Steam, because it's just like nothing really happens for 5 minutes. It's just like in the background. So it's good. It's like, as I said, it's an enjoyable listen. I feel like I described it with a bit more vigor than I actually feel about this jam. But it's a good one. I've never been super hot on this one. It wasn't a case of in 2018 I was like, every single thing that happens is way better than everything that's ever happened before, and that's because it's 2018. I remember at the time being upset at this being a 1 seed. And not thinking it deserves its spot.
When we did our first pass through all this, or at least a couple months ago, getting ready for this project, I actually had the Golden Age coming out of the bracket. I actually had the Golden Age winning the whole thing, which it ended up not being smart. I've since recalibrated. This is my 7th favorite jam of the year, so I could see this as like a 2 seed. It's great. I think I liked it at the time more than most other things because it has a unique and quick groove that's just like different than a lot of 2018. And we've talked about the uniformity of some of the jams. So this, for whatever reason, just kind of spoke to me as being a little different. That said, it crushes the 46 Days. The only notes I have for the 46 Days, which admittedly is a 16th seed, are question mark. Not really sure what it's doing here.
So the Golden Age I have winning very easily. I have it losing in the Sweet 16 though, which we're going to get into because this is my most even region of the entire bracket. I have 4 matchups that were really, really difficult decision wise for me, and we'll get into that. I thought that there was some seeding issues overall, but based on where everything was seeded, it was just a really challenging bracket for me to get through, or region for me to get through. Whereas for comparison's sake, the last region had 2 difficult matchups for me, and then the following will have 3 and 2. So this one has the most difficult matchups for me. I think the Golden Age ultimately, we talk about that turn from summer to fall. Albany has some really nice jams, really good Chalk Dust Torture, amazing Show of Life, great 20 years later. Ultimately, though, I don't think that what was possible in Fall Tour was seen clearly until we got to this Golden Age. And I am here for any jam that goes into Shipwreck. That is the song off of Chilling Thrilling that I wish that they would bring back and play regularly.
You are the captain of a giant passenger liner.
It's so creepy. It's so beautiful. The 46 days, just really quick, funny story. So back in 2018, I was still not like much of an edible eater. I was scared of edibles. I didn't know how to ration edibles properly. I had no idea how to like properly take them and time them and the exact amount that I need. I've thus learned I'm a lightweight, 2.5 milligrams. That's all daddy needs. That's all I need. And I'm in the zone. But towards the end of the first set at this show, my friend handed me an edible and I ate it. And something about, just the vibe, end of summer, last set. I'd seen a lot of shows this tour. I was surrounded by all good friends. We had really good seats this night. We were in our favorite section, but we were down a few rows. So we had a really good view of the band. I remember they came on, they do this 46 days Tweezer Golden Age. And the rest of the set, this doesn't matter, but like I was feeling so good and I was dancing and I was grooving. And the show ends, the lights come up, and I announce that was a perfect set. And some guy walks past me and goes, fucking Jabu in the middle of the set. What's wrong with you?
So I'm just gonna, for anyone who may not have perfect recall, I'm gonna go ahead and read the set. And
thank you, because I was at their show and I have no idea what they played.
So that Brian was really being affected by this
Really
edible when a set that goes 46 days, Tweezer Golden Age, which is excellent, and then Steam, Song I Heard the Ocean Sing, both of which are like 6 minutes long, Jabu, which is like 8 minutes, and then Susie Greenberg, Character Zero. Perfect set.
It's the ultimate like fourth quarter song dump. But I was like, that was a perfect set, and this guy is just like fucking Jabu right there. And I remember just being like, I'm never gonna speak publicly ever again about Phish. And I'm also never and I was also like, I'm never going to like hasty rank this way. And because I remember getting back to the car and like just feeling really bad. And getting back to the car and the live Phish app opens up, or it updates, and I look at it and I was just like, the hell is wrong with you? That was not a perfect set at all.
Fucking idiot.
In the moment reactions oftentimes don't lead to anything real with Phish. But yeah, Golden Age is great. Let's go on to the next one.
All right. Next matchup, we've got 8 seed 1229 Wolfmans up against the 9 seed 1023 Mikes. Not a whole lot going on in this matchup. I feel like this is the weakest 8-9 matchup in the bracket. This is why my Golden Age advances. I picked Wolfmans here. More enjoyable listen for me. I realized, kind of looking at it like that, I may be being very hypocritical and going off of like, this is a more enjoyable listen, not the better jam. But this Mike's is a perfectly pleasant 13 minutes. Nice major key pivot. But yeah, that's don't have a ton to say about it.
I feel like if this were properly seeded in this bracket, it would be like a 22 seed. I don't know what it's doing in here. It is enjoyable. Is there like a bit of a party time vibe here, or did they go to party time after this?
So did you only listen to the first Wolfmans?
Probably is this when we were arguing about party time?
This is what everybody's been arguing about.
As someone who participates in multi-hour Phish podcasts, I just could not have cared less about whether it was party time or not party
Oh my
time in the
God. I
moment.
hated this debate so much.
This is probably what eventually got you off of social media, Brian.
It
Just
was one of
all
the things.
all the tweets.
It was this, and then below it was election denialism.
Fair.
Right. This is worse.
Yeah.
This is way worse.
The one thing about the mics, which is where I went with this bracket pretty easily, is that I like how it does get kind of noisy at the end. Just little chaotic nature to the jam. So it was the mics for me, but doesn't go any farther than the second round.
Yeah, I picked Mike's. Ultimately, the Wolfmans, I remember being a ton of fun in the moment. I remember it ended that set really nicely. Did a great job of setting us up for what would come in that second set. But it doesn't hold the same value when I re-listen to it. And it's a fun listen, you're absolutely right. But it's kind of like that Goose soundcheck jam that we were talking about this morning. It's good, but it's just like there's no reason for me to go back to it. This Mike's, however, this does not jam in the style that most Mike songs jam in.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than jamming off the F sharp, B minor, they almost move up to like, I think it's like C sharp. Like they're
I
jamming
thought
in a
they'd
very
go
weird
A.
key. Is it A? I'm not a music theory guy, so
I'm pretty sure
I'm,
it's just an A. I could be wrong.
whatever it is, they go into a key that they don't typically jam mics in almost immediately. So you're kind of taking what in say like 1995 1997 would have been the result of 17 minutes of jamming, and they tack that on immediately, and you get this 6 or 7 minute segment that's really really interesting. So it's not going to beat the golden age for me, but I thought it was a really good Mike song. I also this is my second, way too high. The Wolfmans needs to go down. This is like an 11 or 12 seed to me.
Yeah, fair. All right. Next matchup, we've got the 1230 Everything's Right at a 5 seed up against the 1230 Tube at a 12 seed. So this is not a competition. This region also was the first one voted on in this bracket as well. And so this is why it is riddled with like two jams from the same show up against each other. There are, again, 3 Everything's Rights. The whole bracket after the first couple of weeks of voting and everyone being like, this is a shit show. The rest of the bracket was reorganized a little bit, so there were less issues like that. But so this region, kind of had the misfortune of existing like this. But as Brian, you mentioned earlier, this 1230 Tube does not belong here, let alone as a 12 seed. This Everything's Right is amazing. It was the winner of the whole bracket in when this was voted on originally in early 2019.
The Everything's Right.
Yes, I do not agree with this winning. I do not think it's Jam of the Year. I do think it is absolutely phenomenal. It's very focused, very like textures on overlap with each other very, very well in this jam, and I love it. But yeah, so it wins here for me, makes it all the way to the Elite Eight, beating out that Golden Age. But I do not think it is worthy of making it out of this region.
I think this Everything's Right's perfect. I think it's beautiful. I think it's some of the best Trey tone I've ever heard. When we interviewed Ryan Chicheri from Trey's Guitar Rig for Undermine season 3, when we were talking about the sound of Madison Square Garden, he immediately linked up with this jam and talked about how being there for the show and hearing Trey play this jam in that room elevated so much for him. And it's Trey completely understanding how to utilize that space. As I've noted, the 1230 Tube should not be here. The 1230 Everything's Right I have as this is too low. This should be at the lowest, a 2 seed, probably a 1 seed though. I ultimately, in the same way as you, Ryan, I have it losing in the Elite Eight, have it beating the Golden Age. It loses to my eventual Jam of the Year. So you can see it's very highly ranked for me. If this is in another region, I'm just kind of looking around here. I think that if this was in one other region, it would make it into the Final Four and would have a chance at making it to the championship round. I think that this has a case to be the Jam of the Year. I ultimately went with the jams that not only have this kind of focus playing with effects, but also get into that weird, dismal kind of creepy zone that a few other jams do better. So everything's right. Maybe 6 more minutes, a little bit more post peak jamming. Of course, you get a really cool set list gimmick after this. Like the whole 12:30 show. This is my favorite show of the year. At the time, I said that this was the best show since the Fuck Your Face show. I think that that still holds true. It's an incredible, incredible achievement for the band from a set list standpoint, from a jamming standpoint. Very, very re-listenable. Just awesome stuff. But yeah, I love this. Everything's right.
Yeah, I think it's a great jam. I have this as my 15th favorite jam of the year, so I guess that means it could be like a 3 or a 4 seed, so perhaps even a little underseeded. Um, but you're right, it's so economical. It's only 15 minutes. I mean, and it does everything that Phish was doing well in 2018, with the exception of the post peak exploration. But yeah, synthy, moody, subterranean, and then it pivots and it's synthy, but light and airy. It's like both yin yang of what the sound is like in 2018. So yeah, great great jam. This is the second. This was the third jam entry in this bracket. The tube here. It's enjoyable. It's Phish. We love Phish. But where my notes were, huh? Question mark. I don't know what's going on here, but yeah, everything's right for me. It does, even though it's such a great jam, it actually does not make it out of the second round, though, for me.
Well, I mean, it's up against a pretty excellent jam in the second round, at least on my bracket, and I assume most people's, which is the 8-4 Soul Planet at a 4 seed up against the 724 Song I Heard the Ocean Sing at a 13 seed. Before I talk about this Soul Planet, I want to highlight that this Song I Heard the Ocean Sing is a really, really cool jam. There's a lot of interesting things going on rhythmically. And you've got a cool section where Page is playing Rhodes and Worley with one hand each, which kind of layer on top of each other in a very cool way. But this Soul Planet is, still the GOAT. This is one of those 2018 jams that peaks and fades away to almost nothing. And Trey is like, no, we're not done with this yet. And then they play for another 10 minutes. Really great jam. I love it. It's one of those, like, it gets to that heavy second peak, before it kind of fades out again. But this show also, just much like the whole Alpharetta run, is really, really strong.
Brian, before I talk about how great the Soul Planet is, question for you, just since I know that you were, kind of like me, really, really, really into Phish back in 2003, 2004. A song I Heard the Ocean Sing. Do you think that just as a song and not as a jam vehicle is underrated or overrated or properly rated by the fan base?
I tend to find a lot of people like it, so I would say it's properly rated, but I think it's leans underrated in the sense that it's just not played as much as I would like for it to, and it's not one of those songs that, like, you know, you see everyone's pick 5 and they're every show I want to hear Reba, Tweezer, Bowie. Everyone wants to hear the classic songs. And to me, a song I Heard the Ocean Sing is, I think, one of the best songs they've written. It sounds like a 90s shoegaze song to me in a lot of cases. And it feels to me like it could get more love. But then again, I meet a lot of people who immediately like it.
Yeah.
So it's in that weird middle ground. What are your thoughts?
100%. Like for it feels a little underrated, but maybe that's just because I love it so much. And again, just the
Yeah.
song itself, and maybe that speaks more to the heaviness of the song and the era that it came out of. It just was the perfect song for that time. That said, this Soul Planet, it's my 5th favorite jam of the year. This could be a 1 seed, 2 seed for me. It's fantastic. I love it's got a few different movements. I love the dark bouncy groove. It's spare, it's patient. The finish meanders a little bit, but it's unique. So just, yeah, all about the Soul Planet. Actually, I had tickets to go to the Atlanta run. I was living here in Las Vegas, so it was going to be tough to pull off. Didn't end up happening, but man, I've got a little FOMO about missing that run, because it would have been awesome to see all these great Atlanta jams in person.
Yeah, I went with Soul Planet here. I do just want to give a nod. The song I Heard the Ocean Sing is great. It's part of that couplet of songs in 724 that got me really excited about where the band was going. I have distinct memories of having a Mixler going while walking my dog that evening. Very nice night in Denver, and just being really excited. I was about to go see Phish in LA. The band seemed to be coming out of the tour on a really high note. This Soul Planet, though, I have this losing in the next round only because it's up against the Everything's Right. But in another bracket, in another region, I think that this could go a lot further. This show, to me, the 8-4 show, is my favorite show of the Alpharetta run. And this is probably my favorite show of August 2018 outside of the 8/31 2018 show. I just want to read the set list for people because I think people forget about this. Everyone loves 8-3, and 8-3 is fun. 8-3 is a really good show. 8-5 has these really weird set listing hijinks, which got everyone super excited, but kind of falls off in the second set. This is a very solid show straight through. Just quickly. Bounce around the room. Killer opener. Classic song. Chuck Does Torture that goes into a really atypical weird jam. Fuck Your Face. Wolfman's Brother that has some really cool expansion and funk and cool stuff happening. Things People Do. 2-minute fun little page ditty. I know he says Pinterest. Ridiculous. Why the fuck is he doing that? But good
But it's
song.
fun.
It's fun. Lengthwise in a Maze. Love it. Give me a classic pairing like that doesn't happen every day. Waiting All Night, one of the best songs off of Fuego. That is a Yola Tango ballad if I've ever heard Phish do one. Divided Sky, freaking classic Phish. Come on. Character Zero, who's going to complain about that? Set 2, Cross-Eyed, awesome opener. Soul Planet right here, 24-minute, 23-minute, just meaty, just inspired jam.
Thick.
Song I Heard the Ocean Sing, thick jam. Song I Heard
Dense.
the Ocean Sing, great version. Piper, 13 minutes of absolute raging Piper. Possum, Slave, great classic closing to the set. Then we encore with Squirming Coil. There's absolutely nothing to complain about with that show. You walk out of that show, you've gotten all these different flavors of Phish. And it's all, bracketed around this Soul Planet that just holds the entire show up and showcases that Soul Planet is not just a song that Trey had to kidnap Page in his own home with a film crew and force him to learn live on set before putting into a documentary where Page didn't even get to sign off on it, but it had to be like, oh yeah, it's these chords. Yeah, this is a fun song. We're not going to play this live, right?
Yeah, and Trey goes to teach it to Paige, and in about 17 seconds, Paige is like, "Got it. Yeah, no, I see. Yeah,
This is the song that we're doing for the gag this year."
And then Peter walked in and was like, "This song rules." And
haha.
the rest.
Peter wasn't even in Goose at that point. So
I know.
Anyway,
August 2018, he wasn't in Goose.
Soul
When
Planet.
he joined?
He taught Paige Soul Planet. In,
In 2017.
2017.
Right.
Yeah.
Fair.
All right, next matchup, we've got the 731 Everything's Right at a 6 seed up against the 731 Down with Disease at an 11 seed. This is what I'm talking about in terms of weird bracketing because like these two jams are right next to each other in a show, and they shouldn't be against each other in the first round. But this Everything's Right wins for me. I remember the Down with Disease winning when this was when this was originally voted on, which I was not super happy about. But, this Everything's Right is awesome. I would say it is probably the third best of the year, despite being the longest. But really good couple of, multiple peak action. Great jam. Enjoyable listen, as it tends to be. It
is super interesting to, as a matchup, put jams that, are connected in real life against each other. I scored the Everything's Right as a 7 and the Down with Disease as a 7.5. So I went with the Down with Disease. It's actually my 9th favorite jam of the year. Could be like maybe a 3 seed, I guess, with that math. And the only reason that it got the edge was it's just a little more sinister, I think, than the Everything's Right, which is something that speaks to me. It's got that spacey finish, but it is interesting considering them against each other just because it's more fun to think of them just as a complete, however many minutes long stretch it would be, 36 minutes or so. But great stretch here in this Austin show. And I remember as this summer tour was unfolding thinking, this Austin show, but I mean, got 2 great jams here back to back. So who was I to judge?
True.
Yeah, I was at this Austin show. As I noted, the first set, the most exciting thing that happened was Mike took off his pants. Look at that set list. You want me to read this set list? This is like as bad as it gets. Sample in a Jar, Light, Moment Dance, Funky Bitch, Heavy Things, Theme from the Bottom, Brian and Robert, Halfway to the Moon, The Line, I Didn't Know, 46 Days. Like,
This was
that is about as
also that was also the first sample since the Baker's Dozen, and so everyone was like, "Is it gonna happen again?" You know, and then no.
my brother and I stumbled upon some drugs at this show.
Oh, just by
And
chance.
Tylenol,
just by chance.
ibuprofen.
I mean, it's Texas. It was
Well,
it was a
Advil.
very limp shakedown street. But we didn't really want to take them because we were both kind of jet lagged, and we wanted to do a tour of Austin breakfast taco joints in the morning. And we knew if we took drugs, we were not going to be able to get up and do that.
Did you?
So we made a deal. If they jam in the first 2 songs, we will ingest drugs. And they opened with Sample, and we were both like, "Oh my god, it's the first sample since the Baker's Dozen. This is going to be huge." And then it was just Sample. And then they played Light, and I looked at him and I was like, "We got to eat the drugs." And
Did you eat the drugs?
and he was like, "Let's just see what happens." And nothing happened. So no, we just hung out. We had a Cali sober night. But set 2, the Everything's Right disease. I mean, this Everything's Right is stunning. People should go back and re-listen to this. I have this. It should be a little bit higher. It is all Trey led, but it is some of the most inspired Trey of the entire year. Justin, you've been nailing this the entire podcast, talking about how Trey was really trying to figure out his rig. He almost kind of kicks everything aside at this point in time, and it's just like there's no effects. It's just him riffing. He comes up with a beautiful riff, and he just rides it. And it's a 19-minute Everything's Right that broke that song open. And every single version from this version for the remainder of 2018, for the majority of 2019, into 2020, parts of 2021. I mean, since this version, this has been one of the most high batting average songs that you can expect to hear at a Phish show. The
Damn right.
Disease counters it completely. In a perfect Disease sense, it gets dark, it gets sinister. It's got this kind of sinewy type of riff from Trey. I don't think that this Disease stands a chance against the Everything's Right in this competition. Actually, I take that back. I don't even want you to edit it out. I'm just realizing I'm a hypocrite in the moment. I have this being one of my more challenging matchups of the overall region because they're just 2 really quality jams back to back. But ultimately, Everything's Right wins.
All right. Next matchup, we've got the 728 Fuego at a 3 seed up against the 11-1 Twist at a 14 seed. This Twist is kind of mostly forgettable for me. I'm not sure if you guys feel differently because you were there, but it's an okay Twist. Nothing crazy. But this Fuego is awesome and gorgeous. And you have that like coily jam in the second half that's just absolutely beautiful. Brian, I think that this was the highlight of the forum run that you were at there. This show had that Kill Devil Falls that you said that should have made the bracket. Really excellent Jabu as well to open the second set. And this Fuego. This is the best Fuego in a string of years where there were a lot of really uninteresting Fuegos.
Yeah, I remember when this started, I groaned. Big
yeah,
fan of the pod. Ben Greenfield and I looked at each other and we're like, well, they're mailing it in. But we ultimately
little
won
did
out.
you know they were taking a break from mailing it in.
Little did I know they were about to have their most inspired moment of the run. The 11-1 Twist. The most exciting moment of the 11-1 Twist is when I thought they were going into Catapult, to which I grabbed Justin's shoulders and started shaking him and yelling Catapult, and then they didn't, and I got a little bit embarrassed. But there's this weird, demented...
What was the... Sorry, what made you think that they were going to Catapult?
Well, there's this weird demented kind of carnival moment where the band is like, Fishman's doing just like snare drum, just like, and like over it, Paige is playing this like really weird kind of demented melody. I think at some point Trey steps to the microphone and starts singing a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, they're going to play Catapult. It's going to happen right now. And I hadn't seen Catapult to that point since my second Phish show. And I got very excited. No Catapult. So you know what, Twist, you're just going to get blown out here by the Fuego.
For me, this Fuego is really interesting. It's beautiful. I have the Fuego winning, of course, over the Twist. When I was listening to this, and I forget if I was doing the Mixler thing or if I had just heard it early in the morning, when I got up for work. I did not recognize the tease, the celluloid heroes tease that inspires like the tail end, the uplifting part of the jam. I think that's noted in the Phish net set lists and whatnot. Uh, but to me, this raises the question of like, okay, because in the moment I thought, holy crap, they're composing this on the spot. This is one of the most beautiful melodies that I've heard. And then come to find out, oh, actually, and what I need to look it up right now. Celluloid Heroes. I forget what band does that come from. Is that Bowie? Is that the
Kinks.
Kinks? Okay, thank you. That was going to be my second option. Um, but to me, this is like the pivot point of 2018 as they latch on Paige and Trey to the Celluloid Heroes tease, and it just gives them something to work off of. And I feel like after this, things by and large were on the up and up for for the rest of the year. And I have no memory. I don't even recall how early into summer tour this LA run was, other than it was probably after the Gorge. But I went Fuego here. I love this jam. This is probably one of my favorites in summer tour, simply on account of this borrowed beautiful melody from the Kinks, which was stuck in my head for like the next 3-4 months. I would just hum Celluloid Heroes over and over and over to myself. So it was it was Fuego for me. It only makes it into the second round. I rolled with the Down with the Z's after it, but really kind of an interesting, memorable jam just because of those reasons.
Yeah. Second to last matchup of this region, we've got the 10-16 20 years later at a 7 seed up against the 8-8 Everything's Right at a 10 seed. This is a tough matchup. Both of these jams are awesome. This 20 years later that I ended up going with was the first jam of fall. Really, like, it was the first time it was like, okay, like, summer had a lot more. Obviously, there are some darker jams, but it had a lot more, a higher percentage of lighter jams, sticking to more major key stuff, at least in a lot of places. This 20 years later just goes in to the dark synthy sludge and is awesome. It's evil. Could I have listened to this go on for a little bit longer? Most definitely. But this is awesome. Everything's Right. Also really cool. That dual peak action that we see a lot of in 2018. We keep talking about the post peak. You get a perfectly pleasant first, pretty standard Everything's Right peak, and then they come around again, build up this nasty minor key thing for the second peak, and it's huge. And then you get, foreshadowing to 2022, this nice rocky transition back into the ending of the song that kind of wasn't really necessary. But yeah, I went 20 years later here.
I went 20 years later as well. I think the Everything's Right's really nice, but the 20 years later just gets to that zone. It's you said it really well. It's dark, it's murky, it's kind of mysterious. It feels like they immediately locked into the sound that would carry them through the remainder of the 2018 playing year. And I remember walking out of 2018 and even, extending it out to Mexico 2019 and just thinking this band is on a very, very hot streak right now. And we're hearing some really quality music out of them. And this 20 years later kind of shifts. It feels like a fall jam. It feels like something that could not have happened over a summer tour.
This is a really tough matchup for me. I had to really think on it. I ended up giving the edge to Everything's Right. Maybe it was a attendance bias. I was randomly on the East Coast and caught this show solo. Maybe it was because of Ryan, as you alluded to, they've got a really vigorous, shreddy second jam after kind of the routine Everything's Right dealio. I love those dark shades of 2.0 sounds is how I put it down in my notes for the 20 years later. Both great jams. I went with Everything's Right. It ends up, though, not getting out of the second round for me, though.
All right. Our final matchup of this region here, we've got the 8-4 Piper at a 15 seed, and my jam of the year at a 2 seed, the 10-27 No Men in No Man's Land. This is one of my favorite jams I've ever been in attendance for. This was the first 20-minute jam I was ever in attendance for at my fifth show. So, took me a while to get there. But I was very excited here. Notably, I called Steam like a full minute before they went into it. In the death reggae section. But this jam is amazing. It's expansive. It gets revived kind of post first peak, and just really takes its time developing into that final ending. As I said, death reggae. It's like a death reggae march of sorts. It's so good, and there's so many different sections to this jam. But in the end, I had to give it the edge. In the finals against a jam that we're going to talk about later. But it beats it 20 years later for me. It beats the Fuego as well. It beats the 12:30 Everything's Right. Gets to the final four here, and then it wins. But yeah,
Wow. So
yeah.
just so we're all on the same page, this is your favorite jam of the whole year, and you were there for it.
I feel like you're about to drop some sort of bomb. Make me feel like an idiot with the way that.
No, not. I just want to make sure I heard you properly. I agree.
Yes.
I love that it's multi-sectioned. I love you were describing it as death reggae. For me, it was like a really downbeat, dark space alien jam is how I non-musically described it. I have the No Man and No Man's Land as my 6th favorite jam of the year, so easily like a 2 seed. And yeah, for me, this goes all the way to the Elite 8. It ends up being edged out for me by the Soul Planet. But as we've described, a lot of these jams are really, really clustered closely together here. So I don't have any qualms with No Men's coming out. I'm not going to give you a hard time at all.
I have it beaten the Piper here. I have this. This is my jam of the year as well, for many of the same reasons that Ryan laid out. This is also the jam that made myself and a number of people think that they were going to be covering. What was that weird '80s band? The Residents.
Yeah.
The Residents. Everyone thought that they were going to cover the Residents after this because there were hints about it. The logo on the tickets all turned into a giant eyeball, and this jam just sounded like something from that band.
Everyone should know by now that anything that gets hinted at is not happening.
Yeah, but the excitement is all part of the fun.
It's true.
This jam, though, I think it's stunning. I remember this was a Saturday night. We had friends in town. We were streaming the show. The show itself is okay. Nice little blaze on in the first set, but it's really when they drop to the Snowman, and it just like it blows up in a really fascinating way. And the band, similar to the Golden Age in this bracket, kind of follow just down the rabbit hole and don't let up and allow the weirdness to take over. And it's what I love the most about 2018 is the band knows how to jam again. They know how to communicate with each other. They know that when they get to 18, 19, 20 minutes, just see what's around that next corner. Something could appear. If it doesn't, just fade into a new song. Unless it's down with disease, and then you should finish the song apparently. But it showcases a ton of creativity, a ton of risk taking, a ton of just trust, and a ton of just opportunity for the band to communicate in an abstract manner. It defines for me the best moments of 2018. And even though it has to take down the Everything's Right from 12:30, even though it has to take down the jam from the other side of the bracket in the championship game that we'll talk about in a little bit, it is still just to me, this is the example of what 2018 Phish is at their best.
There we go. All right, and that brings us to the halfway mark of this bracket. Moving down to the bottom right in the how did you pronounce this, Brian? Name of the region?
Oh.
Thank you. Thank you. Very, very eloquent.
Oh no, it's
pronunciation.
Zhuzh.
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 Zhuzh. All right. We've got the 1 seed 1021 Simple up against the 16 seed 831 Harry Hood. This hood doesn't need to be here. This is a hood. It's a good hood. It's not a bracket hood. As you mentioned, the 11-1 hood is phenomenal and should be in this bracket.
Thank you.
This 1021 Simple is phenomenal. Well deserving of the 1 seed. I feel like I'm about to hear a contrarian opinion from Brian on this jam. But this jam is just it's pure joy. You get a little bit of grime in the first half, a little bit of space, nice roads from Page, and then we take off and it's just joy, much like the 1229 tweezer. You can hear the crowd going nuts as it builds and builds and builds. This was also in the first set. So still, like, while it was happening a lot in 2018, this was a 20-minute jam in the first set. Huge, huge deal. This first set is amazing from this show. The second set, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, kind of suffers from the line and Rise Come Together being in the middle. But this first set, stealing time from the faulty plan, the first skin it back since 2015. Brian and Robert, Timber, this simple Mexican cousin, jammed out Camel Walk that's grimy and very interesting. Back on the train, saw it again. So strong set. But this simple is absolutely phenomenal.
I love this simple. I think it's totally fun. I think it rules. I think it is probably a 3 seed just because we're kind of retreating on ideas that have already been done in better places. It's a very joyous jam. It is amazing in the slot. I agree with you completely. This first set rules. I don't think it's a 1 seed, especially in 2018. I do think, 2 or 3 seed would be a little bit better for me. I have this going though all the way to the Sweet 16 because it goes up against a jam in the second round that it pretty easily beats, especially with the no segue rule. But ultimately loses to a very, very brilliant jam in the Sweet 16. So, like this simple a lot. It's a ton of fun. It is one of those jams I remember like everybody freaking out about when it happened, and then I listened back to it and I was like, it's great. There's just not much there beyond it being a fun jam, and so it didn't do much heady wise to me. What say you, Jason?
I agree with what you're saying. It's not reinventing the wheel, but I disagree because at the end of the day, I love everything that it's doing. I think this is super representative of the overall year. We're not breaking ground, on October the 21st here. However, I have this as my number one jam of the year. This is, upon consideration and reconsideration, what I enjoyed listening to the most. So, with the high floor, low ceiling, a lot of stratification to all the jams across the year, this is just what ended up speaking to me the most. Although we have, a lot of competitive jams, I love that it's chill and that it's dark early, a little dog log action at 10 minutes. Although anytime Mike hits a repetitive bass line, I'm the guy thinking dog log. They're going to play dog log. They don't. And Trey's playing a very familiar lick around 12 minutes. To your point, Brian, we're not, getting into uncharted territory. But my favorite thing about the jam is just the high energy Phish kicking ass and driving things to the finish. The latter part of this jam is just so high energy. It just makes me happy. It's just, of all the great jams of 2018, this is the one that kind of tugs at me the most. So, I've been giving Ryan shit about, 2018 is kind of like vanilla ice cream. It's great. It's delicious, but it's not insanely unique. I really like this jam though. It's kind of almost like a guilty little pleasure.
All right, there we go. Next matchup, we've got the 831 Ghost at an 8 seed up against the 1020 Tweezer at a 9 seed. I'm now just looking at, after I just pulled up the set list for 10/20/18 here on Phish.net and noticed that they changed the notation for Slow Llama from slow funky version to performed in an alternate arrangement. So interesting. I'm curious the decision behind that because it's pretty decidedly slow funky version, but that's me every time Goose comes up with a new version of Indian River or another song and I have to name it. But this tweezer, I like this tweezer. It has a little bit of ADHD in the jamming where it like goes through different jamming sections a little bit not cohesively, but really cool placement. I love opening a second set with first tube, absolutely getting the crowd like riled up and foaming at the mouth, and then dropping directly into tweezer off the last note. You can hear as Trey starts into it, the crowd just loses their shit. Being in Hampton for this moment must have been awesome. And this is a great jam. Very strong Rhodes work from Page here. Trey leading on a nice Bliss segment. But as I mentioned, it kind of feels like a few different ideas stitched together in a less than perfectly cohesive way. This Dick's Ghost is awesome. Brian, yes, with the segue into Cross-Eyed, it would be a lot higher. But it's a solid jam. I go Tweezer here.
I went Ghost, even without the segue being allowed. In my mind, it's allowed because there is no Ghost without Cross-Eyed here. It's important to remember, when they played this show, there were a lot of emotions. A lot of people were crying during the Harry Hood. This was the first show after Curveball, and there seemed to be a lot of like, that happened. Holy shit, we got to embrace every show like it's the last one we'll play. You get this free opener, you get Harry Hood, you get What's the Use, just standalone What's the Use into Blaze On, that doesn't really do anything crazy, but it features Trey strutting the stage, looking at the crowd, just spitting lines. It's amazing. And then it pauses, and it's kind of this first pause 30 minutes into the show, and everyone's kind of clapping, going crazy, and they go into Ghost, and the place lost its mind, and Ghost builds into this perfect segue into Cross-Eyed and Painless, which then goes into Simple, into Cavern. Before you know it, the set's over. It's just it's an excellent show. This Ghost was the highlight of the overall show for me. I remember just kind of thinking that I had the same sensation I had at the Chula Vista show in 2021, where I remember looking back during Tube and thinking that the crowd was elevating 15 feet off the ground.
We were.
And I had that sentiment. Exactly. I had that sentiment during the Ghost. And so I definitely let some attendance bias come in here, but Ghost is the winner for me, only to lose to the Simple, which is highly overrated to everyone but Justin.
Thank you very much.
I don't think it's highly overrated.
I'm just fucking around.
This is a tough matchup. I rolled with Ghost. Both great jams. Ryan, to your credit, anytime I hear the clav being more pronounced nowadays, I'm like, oh, Ryan Storm.
That's what I'm here for.
You've really carved out a niche for yourself, young man. Well done.
Thank you.
I remember. I'm such a bad hippie. I remember being at this show and thinking, God, this is really, really good. Brian, I actually think this was before we had hooked up. I think I was just flying solo on the floor. Great seats, great vantage point, great music. Thinking, oh, fantastic. Wasn't thinking, oh, we could lose everything in an instant, a la Curveball. But again, just bad hippiness.
You were just vibing out.
Yeah, I was just having a grand old time. The tweezer is great. I like how quick it gets late in the jam. But yeah, this is a tough call. But for me, it was Ghost, and then it does lose to the jam of the year in the Simple.
There you go. There we go. Next up, we've got the most definitely underseeded 12:30 split open and melt at a 5 seed up against the 9-2 tweezer at a 12 seed. As you mentioned, Brian, this tweezer is okay. It's 14 minutes. It's blissy. It's all about the segue in from 46 days. Otherwise, pretty standard. This melt is fucking phenomenal. This is my favorite melt of the year. This is better than 11-3 for me. This one just goes into... This one just goes into the zone. I did an episode of this podcast talking about this melt up against Big Cypress a couple of years ago with Matt Kalinsky. That's a great episode. Everyone should go check it out. I want to say it's episode 7. But this melt is just incredible. This is Page for me, let alone the Trey textures that are happening and Fishman doing weird shit. And Mike also doing weird shit, but this is Page's utilization of different synths and different electric pianos in different ways throughout this jam. I haven't listened to this jam in a little while, actually, and I think I'm going to go listen to it later now because I'm feeling very passionate about it at the moment. It only makes it a couple of rounds for me before losing to the Simple, which Brian, is going to scoff at because obviously he has this beating the Simple. But this is my melt of 2018. This is truly awe-inspiring jamming in this, also from an absolutely insane show. And rant.
I love this Split Up in a Melt. I think it's a brilliant capstone to the overall what I think is the best show of 2018. Going into this bracket, I thought that this was the better Split Up in a Melt between this and 11-3, and then doing the A/B test. 11-3 just wins out a little bit from. There's just a very different style of music that they go to in the 11-3 version, whereas this stays a little bit more in the synth home, which is a really great place to be in. But I will say, I won't reveal what comes out of this the Zhuzh region for a couple of matchups, but I almost had this in the final four, and I think part of my rationale for it not making there was I'd already put the 11-3 Split Up in a Melt in there. I didn't see another option in there. And I didn't want to double up Split Up in a Melt, even though, let's be real, Split Up in a Melt is probably the song of 2018 as defined by this version of 11.
Yeah.
So amazing stuff. I have it ultimately losing in the Elite Eight, but I have it beating a 4 seed in the next round. I have it beating a 1 seed and almost beating a 2 seed. So very, very strong jam. This is, this is like your Miami Heat, your 2023 Miami Heat, where it just cannot be stopped until you would think reality would stop it, but reality just doesn't seem to be stopping the Miami Heat.
Reality doesn't apply to this melt.
No,
and
that's true.
As everyone knows, I love sports, and so I can definitely make a comment on that Miami Heat thing.
We are doing a sports bracket here.
It's true.
We are. It's true.
Sports has made this all possible. And if anyone is listening to this years from now, Jimmy Butler went on an improbable playoff run in the NBA in 2023. No one saw it coming except for the people that did. But we're recording this before the finals. So
I was gonna say, like, this is you making a prediction for what's gonna happen in the future, and then
you know who did see it coming? People. You know who did see it coming?
You.
People like me.
Oof.
who complained that Jimmy Butler was traded for Zach fucking
Brian,
Levine.
just for the record, you're not allowed to leave to go cook dinner if you're padding the time with sports. I'm just going to say that right now.
Levine, this is like the most ridiculous thing that's ever happened in my sports life.
I'll tell your wife, if she's like, why isn't Brian here cooking dinner? It's because he wasted time on the pod talking about sports.
This is the story of my entire life. Teachers being like, you would be finished with this assignment, but you are talking about the 1987 Chicago Bulls and why they were better than the 1988 Chicago Bulls.
This could have been
Shall we move on?
This could have been a 2-hour and 25-minute podcast. Instead, it's a 2-hour and 30-minute podcast.
Yeah, all your fault. Next up, we've got the 831 Light at a 4 seed up against the 1016 Tube at a 13 seed. I feel like this Light is really cool because it's a set closing big jam that doesn't end with the ending of the song. I feel like that doesn't happen a lot. Usually you end with a jam, like something like Split Open and Melt, that returns to the song and closes the set that way, or you get a set closing song like Character Zero, First Tube, what have you. So this one is cool also because this set is awesome. The No Men and No Man's Land, the Carini, the theme. I'm forgetting a song. Oh my God, I should know what the fifth song in this set is. Mercury. Thank you. This Light is awesome. It's a build. It's euphoric. It's cathartic. This is the last moment of the show that really lets out that catharsis from the curveball energy. And you can feel that in Trey's playing in this jam. This is a really excellent example of peaky bliss stuff, and very enjoyable listen, though it does lose to the Melt in the next round. Great work from Paige on this tube here from Albany. This is the first of the 3 big fall 2018 tubes. I'd probably rank it number 3 in my opinion, but that could be my Rosemont attendance bias. But solid jam.
Yeah, I'm almost surprised looking at my bracket right now. I have this Light beating the tube, of course, but then actually have the Light going on and just narrowly edging out the Melt, which is probably not typically what I would do. But I love This jam seems to do what a lot of 2018 jams do. It's kind of introspective. It's peaceful. I like the prolonged peak. I think that's what it really has going for it. There are some Pleasant Valley Sunday vibes, which is like Trey didn't know what to do. Da, 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 da. Like he would just bust out that little melodic lick. But Mike is a bouncy low end clinician, which when he was on in 2018, that's what he was doing. So for me, yeah, it was the light, and the light ends up actually going past the melt onto the Sweet 16, where it gets clobbered by the Jam of the Year, which we've already discussed.
Clobbered.
I think this light rules. I have it beating the tube pretty handily. You guys have said it all. It's almost like effectsless, and it's Trey showcasing speed and tenacity just on the six strings. And it I remember in the moment, friend of the pod, Dave Goldstein said, texted me and goes, Trey is slaying the curveball demons. And it really felt as cathartic as possible. Great closing to the set. Um, this Dick's show, this was my first Dick's run as a Denver resident. And it was very special in that standpoint. And I remember this show felt to me, not just because it was 6 years to the date since the Fuck Your Face show, but it felt like a sibling of that show in a lot of cases. It felt a part and akin to that show. So, love this light, love this show. Very heavy show, but really good. I unfortunately have this losing in the next round to the Split Up and Melt, which is just amazing stuff.
It's an unfortunate matchup for sure. Next up, we've got the 11-1 Blazon at a 6 seed up against the 12-30 Weekapaug Groove at an 11 seed. I just want to say that I absolutely love this Weekapaug. This is a really cool one. It's 12 minutes, but it gets going. There's like a nice little type 1 jam, and then they just dive into minor key. Great synth work from Paige. Nice, Trey getting kind of filthy. And then great segue into Cross-Eyed, which, there were 2 amazing segues into Cross-Eyed in 2018. But this Blaze On is really, really good. One of the best versions of the song of all time. I'd say probably I'd put it second behind Deer Creek 2021. I really like that kind of like the dark like envelope filter breakdown Trey does right at the end. Otherwise, I feel like it's kind of an overlooked jam from the Vegas run. I feel like 11-1 kind of gets skipped because of how good 11-2 and 11-3 are. But this is a great piece of improv. Not going to make it further than one round, but it's real good.
It's really good. 20-minute jam to kick off set 2 in a way that is underrated. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I don't know if I would have it as the second best Blazon ever. I really like the Magnaball version. I really like 1230 2019.
Fair.
A few others that I'm blanking on right now. But Blazon is, this is a song that this kind of represented that like turn to the new era in a lot of cases with Phish. Just looking through the jam charted versions, there's excellent jamming. Mexico this year had a really good version, great one from Hartford last year.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's just, and then this version, it's textured. It kind of goes into stop start jamming, moves into no man and no man's land. It's really, really interesting. Jamming from the band at a time when they were undergoing a lot of evolution. They had just played Casabot Voxed. It was kind of like the side B of Wingsuit. It was like the wingsuit that works type of thing. In the moment, it felt really bubbly and alive and really happy. And to follow it up with this show was cool. Shout out as well to 72917, the Cinnamon Blazon, just an amazing jam there. So I have it winning here. It loses in the next round because, as we're going to talk about, there's a deeply, deeply underrated jam from New Year's Eve.
Yeah, for sure. For me, it's Blazon. No question about it, Brian. You've kind of said it all. The brief start stop jam at the end here. The only thing I want to point out is there's a tired of waiting for you tease at some point in this Blazon. Like who had the Kinks albums on the tour bus? Because we've talked about Celluloid Heroes and the LA Forum Fuego. Tired of Waiting for You is just littered across 2018. It's just always something that interests me. where like, someone gets an earworm, namely Trey, I would imagine, and it just like tends to scatter itself across a year and show up in some of the bigger jams. But other than that, yeah, Blaze On, it does though meet a tough competitor in the next round.
You're gonna want to shoot that tease over to Scott Marks. That Tired of Waiting for You is not noted.
I'm like 1 for 10 when it comes to letting Scott know
You gotta try.
about teases.
I got one in this show after pestering him about it for a very long time, which I'm surprised nobody got to it before me, because in No Man's Land in set 2 of 11-118, Trey plays the entire melody line of Cool Amber and Mercury.
Oh,
Like it's very blatant, and I was messaging Scott constantly for like, I don't know, 6 to 8 months, being like, it's there, it's blatant, it's there. And then I finally got him to revisit it after I found the Cars, Trucks, Buses tease in the 22803 tweezer, because I think that kind of built my credibility a little bit. And then I was like, there's also this other tease.
He gets a lot of crazy requests.
He does. It's true.
We just need Phish covering Power Man, and we need Phish covering Power Man. We need Goose covering This Time Tomorrow, and everything will be okay.
There we go. All right, let's move on here. We've got the 12-31 Seven Below at a 3 seed up against the 11-2 Soul Planet at a 14 seed. God, I love this Seven Below. This is my GOAT. Brian, you and I talked about this one on the episode of We Move Through Stormy Weather that you were on. It was episode 20-something, maybe? Or less than that. I don't remember what number it was. But we talked about Seven Below, and it's a great episode. Brian attempts to take me apart on my opinion of this jam in relation to some 2003 versions.
Wow.
I said attempts. But this jam is amazing. You've got this kind of warm Rhodes-based peak to kind of start it off, and then around the 12-minute mark, they pivot into the funk. Trey starts going ham on the delay, and you see this jam theme that pops up not in 2018, but in early 2019 in the Mexico run, both in the I Always Wanted It This Way and in the Set Your Soul Free. This kind of like delay-filled, choppy thing that Trey does will pop up in those jams. So it's interesting to see to hear its origins here. But this is well deserving of the 3 seed, in my opinion. It is a phenomenal jam from the second set of New Year's Eve shows, which not known for getting huge jams in New Year's Eve shows a lot of the time. This 2018 one is the second consecutive year with notable jams in the New Year's Eve show. The 12-31-17 Jabu and Song I Heard the Ocean Sing are both phenomenal. But this Seven Below is awesome. I'm a big fan. And this 11-2 Soul Planet, I feel like, it gets a little overshadowed by the main big jam of that show. But this second set flows really, really well. Good Soul Planet.
2 things to push back on. One, the Soul Planet is very underseeded. This should be higher. This is an excellent Soul Planet in a very complete second set that without this, even with the highlight in set 1, 11-2 is not the show that it is without the highlights throughout set 2. The Seven Below, well, historically speaking, the second set of the New Year's show was always the peak. 12-31-93, 12-31-95, 12-31-97's Mike's Groove, 12-31-98 has a bunch of cool jams scattered across it, but that whole show rules. 12-31-03, you've got the Great Stash. 12-31-09, that is a perfect second set on New Year's Eve.
12-31-14.
12-31-14, amazing second set. 12-31-13 is the gem set. Starting in 2015, that set became less dynamic, and I don't know exactly what's happened to it, but this second set from this New Year's Eve show rules. The Disease is great, and then this Seven Below is absolutely gorgeous. It goes into a wheel-like jam, which I really, really love. Anytime they channel the wheel, I'm really happy. I am not as big on the delay funk jam that as you are. I think that we've uncovered a reason why I don't love that Set Your Soul Free from Mexico 2019. I think it feels like a crutch. It feels like a let's just make some noise and
Good
play some
noise.
sounds for 2 or 3 minutes. But I love everything that precedes it. So I have this Seven Below winning. I have it beating the Blazon in the next round and ultimately losing to the jam that represents the Georges region in the Sweet 16. But gorgeous, gorgeous Seven Below. I'd encourage anyone who hasn't listened to this in a while to go back to it.
Interestingly enough, and Ryan, maybe I'll ask you to do a fact check here. Is on is there a tired of waiting for UTs that's noted in this jam? Because I've got that in my notes.
Seven Below or Soul
In
Planet?
the Seven Below. To your point, Brian, yeah, a lot of the Trey echoey, kind of feedbacky, echoplex type jamming is definitely there in this Seven Below. I like the high energy peaks. I like the noisy democratic groove that finishes. But for me, I just heard one of those. I'm not going to call it a crutch, but one of those familiar melodic sort of explorations in the tired of waiting for UTs, at least to my ears. The Vegas Soul Planet, it's great. It's a mix of like tweezer and 555 groove early on. It's got joyful peaks, but this was a reasonably easy choice in Seven Below, and then it goes on to beat the Blazon, and then it doesn't go any farther for me than the Sweet 16.
There we go. Next matchup, we've got the 722 Cross-Eyed at the 7 seed up against the 11-3 Sense at a 10 seed. This is a great Sense, if I remember correctly. Strong jam. Again, this second set from Vegas Night 4 is really good all the way through. It flows very nicely, and you get some great improvisation happening. This Cross-Eyed, starts off this set in July. This is the first kind of really good cohesive show of the year. You have some highlights from the 2 nights. Tahoe, Gorge Night 1 was great, kind of up and down in terms of set listing though. Gorge Night 2 was less than great, but Gorge Night 3 is a fantastic show. You have another jam that we're going to talk about a little bit later. You have that Wombat that Brian mentioned that should be in the bracket. And this Cross-Eyed is really, really good. Not good enough to beat the 2 seed that it's going to encounter in the next round, but good enough to win here.
Yeah, I share your sentiments around that 722 show. I think it's the second or third best show of the year. I think thematically, it's everything I wanted to hear out of
kind of an
Phish.
insane take.
Is it? What are your top 5 of the year?
I'd say 1230, 11-2, 1229, and then probably like 831 and maybe 722 rounding out the top 5. But I feel like I don't know if it's top 3. My initial reaction was a little bit crazier than it needed to be on that.
Well, that's why I followed up, because I want
8-3 and 8-4 on a similar caliber.
I think I'd go somewhere, 1230, 11-2 is definitely up there, 831 is definitely up there, 8-4 is definitely up there, and 722. I'm not as high on 1229 on re-listen value as you might be.
That's fair.
It is shocking running through this though how few fall shows there are, because I think fall is really a peak of jams rather than like full shows. But I digress. I love this Cross-Eyed and Painless. I think this whole second set flows just absolutely perfectly. This is an album set of Phish where you put this on Cross-Eyed through Melt, you hear all these sides of Phish, but very thematic. It sounds like Fukuoka in a lot of cases. And yes, I will compare it to Fukuoka. It has that vibe. 11-3 Sense, you're absolutely right. I remember walking into this 11-3 show because 11-2, I went out afterwards to Old Vegas and I stayed up very, very late playing cheap roulette tables and having just a ton of fun. And then I closed the night out at 5 or 6 in the morning eating chicken fried steak with a friend of mine. And I remember going to this, it was a very solo dad weekend. It was amazing. I remember going to this 11-3 show and being like, I got to pace myself tonight. If it's not a good show, it's going to be a very hard show to sit through. I was very tired. And I thought, aside from a little bit in set 1, set 2 really, really delivered. And it's a segment of music here. Carini, 46 Days, Sense, Cross-Eyed, 2001. awesome stuff, and this sense is great. So I don't think that it's necessarily, is it properly rated? I don't know. The Cross-Eyed ultimately is the winner here, that loses to the second seed, which is unfortunate.
I remember texting you, Brian. I think the next day being like, "Hey man, do you want to go on a hike? My family's maybe going to go out for some sushi," and you were like, I don't think I can pull it together." we had a late night in downtown Las Vegas,
Late.
which is
Late.
totally understandable when you're visiting and not living here. I really like the Fukuoka comparison, just in that, like, that speaks to me about this Cross-Eyed, just in the fact that it's so slow and textured, the groove there, and it's just so patient early on. So yeah, for me, it was the Cross-Eyed that came out of this bracket. It ends up only going into the second round. The sense is great. I'm not going to say it meanders, but it does amble its way, and eventually Trey finds the peak. But yeah, big fan of this Cross-Eyed. And just to empathize with everyone who's listening, who's like, I don't know if I could come up with the top 5 shows of 2018 off the top of my head, like both of you guys just did. I don't know if I could come up with that either. But the Gorge Night 3 was like, okay, yeah, they'll pull it together here. It'll be an okay year.
My dude.
There we go. All right. Rounding out this region, we've got Brian's favorite show, the 811 Ghost at a 15 seed, up against the 720 Chalk Dust Torture at a 2 seed. This fucking jam is underrated as hell. Nobody ever talks about this Chalk Dust. It was the third show of the year. They're like, here, have a 25-minute Chalk Dust. Anyway, we're going to move on. This is like the Baker's Dozen Chalk Dust, like cool little brother that is not as good, but follows a similar path in a lot of ways. And then you get that dose of 2018 post-peak Plinko fun jamming stuff. It's multi-sectional. It is a journey. I remember being very, very excited about it when it was played. But that Plinko final section is awesome.
Yeah, this Chalk Dust I have representing the Georges region, which
Zhuzh.
The Zhuzh region, which says a lot, because I think as we've gone through it, it's a very good region, or region, if you will.
If you will.
This Chalk Dust, so starting in 2018, Beyond the Pond did bi-weekly recaps of the tour, and we would pick the jam that we thought represented the previous 5 to 7 shows, and then build an episode off of that. It was a fun challenge because we were immediately listening in the moment, and we were throwing out albums that we recommended and styles of music that we recommended based off of this. And I remember we were like, we got to do the Chalk Dust. It was our 40th episode. Our first episode was on the Camden Chalk Dust. This sounded hints of the Camden Chalk Dust to me, hints of the Baker's Dozen Chalk Dust. I hadn't listened to it in a couple of years. I went back to it for this bracket, and I was like, my God, why does nobody talk about this? I honestly feel like 2018 Phish was playing so well still that people were sick and tired of them playing so well that they had to just start nitpicking things. And as a result of nitpicking things, we didn't celebrate some of the things that should have been really celebrated, like this Chalk Dust and a jam in the next bracket or the next region that we're going to talk about here that I absolutely love. Amazing stuff. This is a great Chalk Dust. It beats everything until it loses to the No Man and No Man's Land in the Final Four.
It's a great Chalk Dust. Totally agree. For me, this is the 11th best jam of the year, so I think it's appropriate as a 2 or a 3 seed. It's a 2 seed here. I love that it's peaceful early, a little peaceful bliss action. I love the spacey coda the most. I think the Ghost is pretty solid. It's very organic. It gets to its blissy peak, but yeah, if the CDT goes all the way for me to the Elite 8, it does get beat by the Simple. And since I'm out on Simple Island here, since I think this is the jam of the year from Hampton, that's fair, but it's a very, very good Chalk Dust.
This was the toughest matchup of the entire bracket for me, was Simple versus Chalk Dust. I went back and forth on it a lot. It took, I think, 5 listens for me to eventually go Chalk Dust. But it was close. It's not easy.
Yeah, of the 4 Elite 8 matchups. Does that make sense? No, there are 8
Yep.
Elite 8
Yeah.
matchups.
No, there are
4
four elite 8
Okay, sorry.
matchups.
4 games for 8 teams.
Thank you. It's been a long day.
Jams, not teams.
Right.
This is music, Brian.
This was one of the 2 toughest choices for me. So just to support what you're saying, Ryan. Yeah, this was tough, even though I did end up going with the CDT past the 7 below, but then the simple. But these are all so clustered together.
It wasn't very difficult. Well, it was tough against the split open and melt, but I have ears that work, so the split open and melt took down the simple. And
Okay. All right. Let's move on to our final bracket here, our final region. We've got the Cleef region in the bottom left. Kicking us off, we've got the 11-2 Mercury 1 seed up against a 10-31 Tweezer and a 16 seed. This Tweezer's okay. You get some nice funky B3 work from Page, but this Mercury is, it's the GOAT. It is amazing. It is a sight to behold. Again, another massive jam, late first set of this already strong show. The first set up until that point had been just like high energy Phish. Like they were playing well. That sand in particular is hot. But this Mercury just opens right up, builds on what they did in Rosemont. Really cool moment for me is you have that, the initial first jam, whatever, and then it descends into space around 17 minutes. Trey comes back to the Mercury like melody in a different key, and then uses that as a springboard for the next portion of the jam, and ends with a great peak, and then into nice Susie to close the set. This jam is incredible. This makes it all the way to the finals for me before eventually losing to the No Man's Land. Yeah, it was amazing. I'm jealous that you both were in the building for this.
Brian, let me ask you this. I'll set you up here. So Mercury wins, obviously. This is my 3rd favorite jam of the year. It's very well seeded as a number 1 seed in this region. Beats everything else. Although there are some close calls. At 16 minutes, there's an inflection point, and it feels, just probably because it's a D chord, that it feels like Trey's about to rip chord into free. And every time I listen to this jam, I have the same like, oh, are we? Does that take away anything for you from this jam? Because I feel like maybe it does like 1 or 2% for me. But then what comes after that riff on like the Nets Unbreakable melody is just so compelling. And Ryan, you described it as like I was playing the Mercury theme, but in a different key, and maybe that's just what I'm hearing. But I don't know. Does that like free potential ripcord do anything for you in a negative way?
Ultimately, it does on re-listen, and I think back to my experience in the room. I loved this show, and I thought the first set was really good. This was a show where you and I sat with a couple of other buddies, and my buddy Ross insists on sitting in the last row of any venue he goes to because he has a lot of space. So we sat up there with him that night. I had very terrible seats that night from Phish tickets by mail. Thanks a lot, guys, for getting me obstructed view seats when I bought the full package from you guys. Thanks, that was awesome.
Shame.
But so we sat. We had. It was actually a really good spot. The sound was great. We could see really well, but we were in the last row. The venue there is super small. But I say all this because I remember just like started Mercury. I was thinking, okay, we got this cool version that hinted at a jam at Allstate. Are they going to continue with this? And when it sounded like it was going to go, I heard Taste, but I also kind of hear Free as well. And I was like, are we really bailing out here? Like, we have a chance right now. And then we heard the Nets Unbreakable line.
Trey heard you in his ear. You have one shot right now, Trey. Don't fuck this up.
This was it. This is a very, and this is a very critical part of the run. We've had Halloween. With the Halloween show, you're not going to get a ton of jams, although the Ghost from 2021 says otherwise. 11-1 was a very nice show, but I think we'd all agree is not an extremely like it's not a show that's going to blow your brains apart.
Mhm.
Not violently, but an 11-2, like this is the show. If this show is a stinker, what are we going to have? How's this run going to be?
Luckily, they blew your brains
Luckily,
apart.
they blew our brains apart. So, yes, to answer your question, listening back, I go back into that stressed out mode of like, are we actually bailing right now? And it feels like they tacked on a jam to the jam. So it loses a little bit. I have this still going really far. It goes to the Elite Eight for me. It's ultimately going to lose to a jam that is going to be in the championship round for me because I think that jam doesn't suffer from the will they or won't they-ism. But
Mm.
I don't know if this is the best Mercury ever. It certainly set the foundation that Mercury is going to be the next jam vehicle, which it would
For a
be for
while.
the next year or so.
And then, they hate it now for some reason.
They just can't play it anymore is the
I-
unfortunate problem.
They've never been able to play it. They have never hit the vocals on the first line. They have never hit it correctly.
Oh, there are some really, really quality versions in 2015, 2016. They're just pure song that I
You
highly
can't have
recommend going back
you
to.
can't have both.
You can't have both.
Now you can't have either.
No.
All right, next matchup here, we've got the 1230 Light at an 8 seed up against the 1026 Golden Age at a 9 seed. I went Light here pretty easily. Nice 20-minute jam smack in the middle of that 1230 set 2. Keeping the improv going after that amazing Everything's Right. Just very beautiful, major key stuff happening, especially in the second half of this jam. Very enjoyable listen. And this Golden Age is cool, coming off the tweezer, one of those big 1-2 punch openings to set 2, as we saw, like that we saw in 1026, like we saw at the Austin show as well, with the Everything's Right down with disease. So it's good. But both of these jams lose to Mercury in the second round, so it's ultimately, kind of pointless.
Yeah, I went with the Golden Age actually to be contrarian. Although they were close, I had the Light as a 6.5 out of 10. I had the Golden Age as a 7 out of 10. I kind of like how the clav gets sludgy and groovy in the Golden Age, and then it's just a little spacey, kind of washy to finish. I did pick up a little plasma vibe toward the end of the Light, which I really liked. But these are both similar jams. I think they're well seated. They both would fall to the Mercury at either rate at the end of the second round, though.
Yeah, I have the Light here. I think it's a good Golden Age. I did think that Light should be ranked higher and Golden Age a little bit lower, but that's neither here nor there. Both would lose to the Mercury. I think the one thing about this Light that keeps coming back to me is, looking at this 12:30 second set, Cool Amber Mercury, I think, is a very underrated set opener, especially if you're not going to jam, just a groove. Everything's Right. We've already talked about that. Plasma, amazing, great version. And then Light. And I remember reading the Phish.net review the next morning and just trying to, am I the only person who's losing their mind right now? And the writer, I forget who it was, said at this point of the set, it's just jams upon jams. And the idea is that as we're jamming, more jams come. And so you get this Light that moves away from standard Light jam territory, and it gets into this space that it just feels very atypical. It's middle of the second set. It's going to go into Velvet Sea, which is going to then go into a stunning split open and melt. It just, without this Light being 20 minutes and anchoring this set at this point in time, it's not as high quality of a show. So it's essential to have this Light do what it does. Ultimately loses to the Mercury, but I thought it was a great version.
Hell yeah. Next up, we've got the final split open and melt that we're going to talk about of the year. 722 split open and melt at a 5 seed up against 728 Soul Planet at a 12 seed. This is the first really, kind of jammy Soul Planet. You had like a 13-minute version in Tahoe. This one's funny also because Trey starts playing the opening vamp, and the rest of the band thought he was playing Ocelot, it sounds like, which just, results in a really funny, like, we need to like a recalibration where I can picture it in my head because I don't think there's video of this show that circulates, but I can just picture it in my head. Trey kind of looking back at Fishman with that, like, that's not what I'm playing, bro. Like, look, and Fishman being like, what the hell are you playing then? And then like So they get it together, and it's a nice jam. But this melt, this starts off, you kind of saw the first part of the melt renaissance with 12:29:17, and you get into it with this one. This is it. Dives off the deep end. Part of that 722 phenomenal show we talked about. Nice cross-eyed tease later on in the jam here. But this one wins for me. It's gonna go a couple of rounds before losing to the Mercury.
I will just hop in just to echo what you're saying. Same for me. It goes on. The melt does a couple of rounds till it loses to the Mercury. It gets down into the abyss rather quickly and just explores the depths, which is phenomenal. The Soul Planet's great. I actually scored these similarly. Both have them as 7 out of 10s. I feel like the Soul Planet might be like a little underseated, but for me it was the melt. This was a tough call though. Could have gone either way.
This is my first of two major upsets in this region. I have the Soul Planet winning here. I love the split up and a melt. I think thematically it concludes one of the best shows of the year really well, the same way it does on 12:30, same way it does on 11:03. But I just think it had something less, and I thought the Soul Planet really showcased where the band was going to take this song. Soul Planet is now one of the more reliable jam vehicles. Every time it starts, you can cringe, but 3 minutes later, you're in jam space, and oftentimes it leads to really, really revolutionary jams, as it would a week later at Alpharetta. I thought this was awesome. It actually makes it into the Sweet 16, where it is stomped by Mercury, a very sad but predictable tale for a 12 seed in the NCAA tournament that makes a run to the second weekend and then meets a 1 seed and goes, this is how you play basketball. But very, very good jam.
Love it. Next up, we've got the 8-3 Tweezer at a 4 seed up against the 12-31 Down with Disease at a 13 seed. As Brian mentioned, this Tweezer is not where it should be. I think it does deserve a place in this bracket. I do not think it should be a 4 seed by any sort of stretch of the imagination. I did surprisingly take it in this matchup though, which is interesting. Like, this is a great Disease. I probably remember it most for the really funny few-second clip of Mike's reaction when Trey goes into Farmhouse from this show, which is just like a look of like, I wasn't done yet, man. Like, kind of looks over, scratches his head, like,
Yes.
But this Tweezer, the first few minutes of the jam are what's really unique about it for me. You have these overlapping textures once again from Paige, from Trey on the Leslie, really cool stuff, and then unique use of the Leslie in the peak of this jam. Is it crazy experimental? No, but enough to go one round here before losing to the melt.
I think maybe this is a little overseeded, but it feels okay in the 4 spot. Maybe it should be a 5 or a 6. I went with the Tweezer. I have these scored reasonably closely. Mike's effects are really shining throughout this whole Tweezer jam. I can't talk about Tweezer in Atlanta, even though we're discussing 2018, without shouting back to 2015, which is just one of my favorite Tweezers of, not of all time, but it's in the top 5 for me. So I love that they called back to it. It is noisy. It's inward focused, but it becomes ebullient. It becomes bright. So for me, it was the Tweezer. Tweezer doesn't get past the Gorge Melt in the next round, but this is a tough call. They're both pretty solid jams. Anytime Mike has his drill going like he does at the end of Down with Disease, yeah, if Trey is ripcording into Farmhouse, Mike's not going to be happy.
I went with Disease. I think it's very psychedelic. It has a very cool peak, and this Tweezer I don't necessarily think belongs in this overall bracket. I think Disease is is a fascinating experimentation here to kick off a really good second set on New Year's Eve. Disease, Farmhouse, Seven Below, Twist, Hood, Passing Through Hood. Good stuff there, man. Really, really good set listing, good set crafting before a very fun third set. But this ultimately loses the Soul Planet, which loses to the Mercury. So these are kind of just like upsets happening more than anything.
There we go. Next matchup, we've got the 1024 Bathtub Gin at a 6 seed up against the 722 Twist at an 11 seed. This gin is awesome. I really like this gin. This show kind of was not great, especially after the tear they had been on for the last few shows. Hampton, first night in Nashville, and then it was kind of like, they're gonna drop a kind of stinker in here somewhere. Second set's kind of weird in terms of flow. Nice pockets of jamming in there, but this gin that closes the first set is excellent. Very, very fall 2018. You've got the grime, you've got some synths, and you've got a nice call to the post tees to end it all off with a nice little bow. But this is another jam that only goes one round for me. It's a very enjoyable listen, though.
Yeah, it only makes it one round for me. Not to beat a dead horse, but I hear a tired of waiting for you teas. I don't know if it's noted or not officially, but like Kinks.
I don't think so.
It's not?
Well, let me verify.
Okay. It probably I'm the king of hearing teases that are not officially noted. But seriously, tired of waiting for you was all over 2018.
Oh no, it is noted.
Okay.
There you
Feel
go.
better about myself. But for me it was gin. I appreciate that the twist is kind of dark early, a little heartbreaker tease action, a little bluesy mini peak from Trey. But yeah, it was the gin, although the gin doesn't get past the second round.
I went twist here. I like the gin. Yeah, I like the gin. Listening back to it, it's got that very slowed down anti-melodic approach to it that I thought was really cool in the moment and just sounded slightly like a mess on re-listen. This twist is highly focused, tons of ideas, lots of teases, and thinking about it in the context of the overall show, it just pushed it beyond for me. So I've got an 11, 12, and 13 winning in this region here, the Cliff region. But this loses to the runner-up jam of the year for me, which we'll talk about next.
Yes, we will. The 725 Set Your Soul Free at a 3 seed up against the 11-2 Light at a 14 seed. Solid Light again from that second set on 11-2. That's really good. But this Set Your Soul Free, the statement that this song would be a big jam vehicle. This was only the second time it had been played after a relatively short, I think like 10 minutes or so debut at the Gorge. They came out in San Francisco, opened the second set with it, and just dropped dropped the hammer with this jam. I know, Brian, I want to throw it over to you to talk about this one, because this is another jam that you were very passionate about.
Yeah, this is my number 2 jam of the year. This beats the Split Open and Melt from 11-3. This nearly beats the No Man and No Man's Land from 1027. This is a mastering of sound. Paige is amazing throughout this. Fishman, Trey are fully locked in. Mike sounds great. He sounds like he really likes what he's doing, playing on stage with the greatest rock band of all time. This sounds like a 2.0 jam to me at times. It touches on things that I don't even think they were doing in 2018, and showcases where the band is going to go from a jamming standpoint. Every time I listen to this jam, it blows me away. I think Paige is the MVP of this overall jam. And, hearing this on a Wednesday night, Thursday night, whatever it was, before I got on a plane to fly to
LA?
Los Angeles,
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, I'm about to hear some of the best jams I've ever heard. And this is a guy coming off of Baker's Dozen plus Dicks. I did not, but this Set Your Soul Free has been one of my favorite jams to go back to. And probably this and the No Man are my 2 favorite jams to go back to.
You gotta never miss Bay Area Phish at this point.
That's a key. Like
absolutely, after the last few Bay Area runs, like the Greek, San Francisco 2021, this run, like
there's magic in the air.
You're guaranteed a 25-minute Set Your Soul Free that's gonna blow your mind. Anyway,
yeah,
Justin.
It's interesting to hear you have that so high. Like we've talked many times over, a lot of stratification here. I have this in my top grouping of best jams of the year. Although for me, this is like maybe the 14th best jam of the year. I have it going on into the Elite Eight. You mentioned Page. I mean, this is a Rhodes meditation. I like that Trey is subtle as it reaches for his peaks here. There's some clav just for young Ryan, and then the spacious outro. So this is as good of a thesis statement for the year as anything else. And it, great jam that goes a couple of rounds. I'll have to listen to it again because maybe I've underranked it a smidge.
A smidge. Next matchup, we've got the 831 Carini at a 7 seed up against the 8-5 Golden Age at a 10 seed. I'm going to go ahead and say that this Carini is awesome. Little shreddy action. It's interesting to look at the 2017 First Night of Dick's second set opening No Man and No Man's Land into Carini versus the 2018 First Night of Dick's second set opening No Man and No Man's Land into Carini. Spoiler alert, 2017 is much better. But this is a cool jam. You're kind of seeing how Trey's kind of getting more of a handle on his new tone at this point. A lot of screaming leads happening, different to what we'll see later on in the set with the light that we talked about earlier. But this beats the Golden Age for me. It's only going one round, but solid jam.
Agree. I love this Carini. This is like the stepbrother to the light, where it's just Trey leads, and that is everything. And it's very good. It was very cathartic. It was very emotive. Golden Age does not belong in this bracket, so this Carini is it. And we got our second year in a row of No Man into Carini to open the second set, night one of Dick's. It felt a little strange, but it was also it was very, very well delivered. Not as good as 2017, but still very well delivered.
It's always interesting when, like, year to year, venue to venue, they'll repeat some of the same stuff. I feel like we think, oh, Trey, he's just forgetful. I feel like he knows what he's doing, and it perhaps is a bit purposeful.
Either Trey knows exactly what he's doing, or he just does not pay attention at all.
It's like almost too coincidental, though, for it to be totally chaotic. I think that the Golden Age is a pretty stout jam. I have these ranked about the same. I ended up going with the Carini. This was a tough call for me. But, and again, you guys will kick me off the podcast here. I hear Trey doing like a slow build through a Tired of Waiting for You-esque march to the peak. I'm sure I've checked before. Maybe it's on the set list. Maybe it's not on Phish.net, but like that is
there is not.
Damn it. So that's just.
Sorry, wait, were you talking about Carini or Golden Age?
In the Carini.
Oh yeah, it is not noted.
Well, I've got a multi points.
You need a spreadsheet of all Kinks jams combined with.
Right. I'm
send a message to Scott. Hi Scott, I found 7 Tired of Waiting for You teases.
I'm not being acknowledged right now, but I feel like I'm probably not wrong. But yeah, for me, it was the Carini, and
it's like Superbad in '97. It was everywhere.
It was everywhere. It's I'm the guy who, when the crosswalk signal starts to beep, I'm like, is that a San Jose tease from Freddie King? So it's fair.
That's awesome. And we have one last matchup in this bracket. One more. Hard to believe. We've gone through this whole thing. We've got the 1017 Shock Dust Torture at a 15 seed up against the Alpharetta Ghost from 8-3 at a 2 seed. This Chalk Dust is cool because it's very, very early on in the show. I think it's like the second or third song, and they tack on a nice little Type 2 little enjoyable jam on the back end, hitting it to around 15 minutes, with the second go-around of the ending. Similar to Vegas. This one's not as good as the Vegas one, in my opinion, but, solid jam. I feel like I still have a little bit of anti-attendance bias for these Albany shows because my parents and my brother went, and I didn't go because it was a Tuesday and Wednesday, and I was in my first semester of university. And we all know how, it made total sense for me to skip those shows. So, but I almost trailed off before talking about this Ghost. Another 2018 jam that I talked about on the podcast, with Coach John Lombardi of Goose in episode 6 of the podcast. We talked about this one up against the It Ghost. It was a great episode. Got a lot of cool stories out of him being on Phish tour, and how that kind of influenced what he does with Goose now. It's a little bit out of date because it was 2 years ago, but it's a very, very cool episode. If anyone wants to go take a listen to that. But this Ghost is awesome. Definitely has aged a little bit worse than some of the other jams in this bracket. Looking back on it, would I still pick it as my Ghost pick if somebody picked a Ghost for the pod? No. But it's a fantastic jam. A lot of great page work. And I've heard rougher transitions back into the ending.
I went with this Ghost. Ultimately, I gave in to the hype. It's a very good Ghost. It's great, and it's the third song of the show, and it's 22 minutes, and you feel everything. And Trey's white pants are like just blinding you when you're watching the webcast. It sounds like summer Phish at its best, where they stumble into a jam that everybody is losing their minds to, and it's very different from fall. I have very distinct memories of streaming this Albany show on Mixlr while driving home from work, and this Chalk Dust Torture went into a jam, and it was similar to the 20 years later. It was this moment of like, okay, fall tour is going to be absolutely incredible. I loved this Chalk Dust, but ultimately this Ghost wins. I have it beating the Carini in a very, very close matchup in the next round, and ultimately losing to the Set Your Soul Free. I talked a lot about the Nashville Ghost that I thought, there's a lot of really interesting and dark and kind of dangerous things. This Ghost doesn't do that, but it's really, really satisfying regardless.
Yeah, and for that reason, I give the edge to the Nashville Ghost over this Ghost. But this ends up, this is like my 12th favorite jam of the year, this Atlanta Ghost. The one thing that I think it really has going for it is it just feels inspired. It's not, it's not blazing new territory. It feels organic as they move between the segments. It just feels like it has a little extra mustard on it. For me, it easily beats the Chalk Dust. It edges past the Carini, and then it edges past the Set Your Soul Free, but ultimately falls to the Mercury, coming out of the Cliff region. Cleef.
Yeah.
Cliff.
Oh man, I love that you brought up Trey's white pants, Brian.
That's good memory.
That was a style icon. Makes sense.
This was the era when he started to.
This was the fashion era.
Sorry.
This was though.
The fashion era.
Shout out to the red hoodie, the black T-shirt. Those were still around all the time in 2018.
I'm still waiting for the brown and tan striped shirt that would pop up every so often in 2009. That and the Nike kicks that he used to wear. Those are my two favorite. Now it's like every show is it's like a wheel of fortune. Like
I know, but that red hoodie that he used to wear, like when he walked on stage in that red hoodie, it was gonna be a good show.
8, 9, 15,
and if Trey walked on stage in a hoodie, you knew it was probably like 95 degrees at showtime, and he was just
exactly.
Like...
He wore that hoodie in like like one of the Mexico shows, and I was like, "What are you like? You're in Mexico, like you're wearing a hoodie."
We got to bring back the fearlessness shirt that came out on Merriweather 20.
While we're at it, someone send him the gold velour shirt. But anyway, I did also want to mention, like, talking about listening to that Albany show on a Mixlr. Like, remember when they didn't webcast every show? That was inconvenient.
Yeah, and you had to pick and choose, and you had to plan. Okay, they're webcasting this, so this is what I'm doing this night. But I listened to all those Mixlrs, and I remember getting shit for having opinions about a show that someone was Mixlering from their pocket, and I was like, I'm still hearing the show, man.
Yeah, I can hear it.
Still hearing the show.
Well, shout out to people that used to, or I don't know if people still do that. I'm a webcast guy, but shout out to the pocket Mixlr.
Thank you
people.
for everyone who did that.
Thank you for your service. All right. Well, we have completed our fourth installment in this Jam of the Year bracket series. I don't know where we're going to. Are we doing 1998 next?
Yes.
98.
We're doing 98 next.
I don't know
so
when, but we are doing it.
We're gonna do it. This year at some point. I'd probably say it'll be a couple of months. Given tours are happening. I don't know if we're gonna do it before we all hang out together in real life at Dick's in September. That's gonna be fun.
You're coming to Dick's, young Ryan?
I'm coming to Dick's.
Oh, sweet. We'll have to tell you where we sit. If you don't tell a lot of people, we'll let you sit with us.
I mean, I'm gonna come bother you for at least one of the shows. Like, I want to do a show with the two of you.
Hell
He and his
yeah.
family have seats reserved in our section. They're already on the guest list.
Can't wait.
Yeah, because Justin and I have been podcasting together for 2.5 years, and we've never met.
Oh
So-
yeah. Well, we'll fix that.
Yeah, we're gonna
We've
fix
only
that.
spent-
So whether we pod again before then or not,
We've only spent literally
exciting.
tens of hours together, if not 20s
Exactly.
of hours together podcasting.
Exactly.
But yeah, all right. Well,
Exactly.
fantastic. Let's hope that Phish is just on a tear by the time Dick's rolls
Yeah.
around.
Let's hope.
Let's hope.
Fingers crossed.
goodness.
I'm excited for the MSG run as well. I'm gonna see 11 shows this year, not counting whether I do the New Year's run because, I need to. I can't decide now which New Year's run I'm going to.
It's a tough.
It's-
Do you want to hear
it's
Auld
tough.
Lang Syne fast or slow? I feel like that's gonna
Right. Exactly.
dictate your choice.
Yeah, so this has been really fun. We came in under 3 hours, so pat on the back. Look at us. Proud of ourselves.
Good
for
job,
that.
guys.
Strong.
Yes. Well, thank you, of course, you guys for being back again. This has been so much fun, constantly talking about these jams. I'm excited to go back 25 years, dive into 1998. This will be the first bracket that we do where not everything will be available in soundboard quality, so that will also be an interesting angle to look at. But I'm excited to see where we land with that one. That is a story for next episode, of course. So this episode is going to come out sometime later in June, I believe. So tours are going to be happening. People are going to be seeing shows. It's going to be very exciting. So whatever you are doing these days, however you're spending your summer, enjoy that. Thank you for listening. If you listened to this whole episode,
Hope it's stormy weather, bro.
no, I hope it's not. I don't want it to be stormy weather.
It's very stressful for the meteorologist when it's
I know the reference / joke you were making. I'm just being an idiot. All right. Well, this
Thanks,
has been a great episode of We Move Through Stormy Weather. Thank you everybody so much for listening. Let us know your favorite jams of 2018. If you think our opinions are wrong, if you think the bracket should be better, let us know on social media at Stormy Podcast. You can tag Justin as well. He's at just1_music on Twitter, and we will relay opinions to Brian.
You can text me if you have my number.
Yeah, and if you don't, then you tell us if you want an opinion passed on to Brian, and we will do so. He's also available once a week, every Friday. You can go bother him on HF Pod. Anyway, thank you everybody for listening to this episode of Move Through Stormy Weather. Have a fantastic day, and I will see you next time.